book titled An Ecumenical Odyssey, Exploring the Redaction and the Reception of the Church Towards a Common Vision, to be published by LIT Verlag Academic Publishers based in Germany. The book presents the results of my doctoral dissertation defended at the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies based in Geneva, released a convergence document on the Church titled The Church Towards a Common Vision in the year 2013. It was the fruit of an ecumenical odyssey, or a long ecumenical journey, so to speak, as it built on earlier drafts, namely the nature and purpose of the Church and the nature and mission of the Church, that were published in 1998 and 2005 respectively. It is far from easy to arrive at a convergence document on the Church, as theologians have to consider the viewpoints of Catholics, Orthodox, and various other denominations around the world and spell out clearly the common agreements or convergences, as well as the divisive elements that are still present among the churches, especially on the nature and structure of the Church. Primarily, with the help of the sources available at the archives of the World Council of Churches in Geneva, I have studied the entire redaction process spanning over 2 decades of this document, as well as the responses from the churches, and have also discussed in my dissertation the impact this document will have on the progress towards Christian unity on a wider level. I deem it my honor and privilege to thank my doctoral promoter, Professor Dr. Peter Demey, who was my inspiration and guide throughout my studies in Belgium. I thank all the provincials and the Salesians of the 3 provinces of Belgium, Trichy and Chennai for having encouraged and supported me in more ways than one. I place on record my sincere thanks to the rector for the Pathiraj, all the former rectors, the teaching and the non-teaching staff, and the students of Don Bosco Theological Center, Kavarapete. I am grateful to my parents, brothers, sister, and my family members and friends for their love and support. I am thankful for the Satish and the John Paul and the staff of SIGA for the cover page and the layout of the book. My invite Reverend Father Don Bosco Luduswamy to release the book, and for the John Alexander, the Vice Provincial, to receive the first copy, who is also the alumnus of KU Leuven, Belgium.
Congratulations to Father Stanley. May I request the dignitaries to... The beginning is the most important, titled Pope Francis's Way, and thinker in the person of Reverend Father, Provincial of Salesian Province of Chennai. May I now invite him to put us into the right perspective and to set the tone of the day through his keynote address.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning. Last week, Father Leo our Surabhi director organized a very nice program on CSR and how with that expectation at least they got some skills and knowledge and how the strategies of how to raise funds and because Don Bosco was one who went around asking for funds, not for himself, and he had a spirituality of fundraising to look for resources that he needed for ministries. On the other hand, I see things like that. Maybe it would have been much more full. But I see, in contrast to the Salesians, more Salesian sisters. I don't know whether the Sister Provincial issue, you can clap hands first. Unlike our Provincial, I think for DJ Margaret send a circular to make sure that sisters are here present. Okay, the fighting is outside, not inside the hall. Sisters and my dear friends, it is with profound reverence and gratitude that we have gathered here today to reflect upon what has undeniably been a significant decade in the history of the Catholic Church, a decade marked by transformative leadership of Pope Francis. This theological symposium serves as an opportunity to delve deep into the profound waves of change, inspiration, renewal that have emanated from the Pope Francis papacy. My deep appreciation to the organizers of this symposium. I hear Father Lourdes. In fact, he was the one who contacted me along with other faculty members. Father Emmanuel, the principal, and other faculty members, and especially the third years of the DBTC for organizing this wonderful symposium. And also I would like to, at this time, appreciate and place on record this wonderful publication by Father Stanley Jaikumar. I do know that finishing a doctorate in Louvain is not an easy task. It is very demanding and it needs a lot of hard work, commitment, and also a real creative contribution. Otherwise, they will not award a doctorate in Louvain University. That is what even kind of informal saying. You might be a doctor elsewhere in Italy or any other country, even in America, but a doctor in other countries is a bull in Louvain. That is the Dutch phrase they use. So just to say how demanding is to study, and I'd like to really appreciate the wonderful work. I'm sure I'll be happy to go through that and tell our professors there in Louvain that such a wonderful work has been produced, and I know Professor Peter Dimay, the quality of demand that he places on students. So with that, my appreciation also to you, dear speakers. We have now, the organizers have put a wonderful, impressive list of speakers. All the four of them really qualified and have contributed into their respective field. So therefore, I would like to also acknowledge their presence, and above all to you, dear participants, for this wonderful initiative. As I already mentioned in the beginning, if there was a feast, a biryani at the end, or some reward at the end, we could have had many more participants. But you have chosen to spend the time to reflect on some important matters, because the quality of our religious life, the quality of what we do for the poor, depends on our kneeling down in prayer and also discussing together and reflecting together. An exercise like this will be a wonderful initiative, and I also like to appreciate you, dear participants. So my wish and prayer this morning is that these efforts become fruitful in terms of knowledge, understanding, and above all bringing about tangible changes in our personal life of our communities and province, church, and society. Just a important note that I like to add here. It is not mere coincidence. It is not a mere coincidence, but I would say a God incidence or a providence that we have the conference in the morning and in the afternoon solidarity event for the victims of Manipur. In other words, our theological reflection this morning leads to a praxis of solidarity and social justice. And just a few days ago, last week, at the top of this week, we have been able to receive 27 students from Manipur who are displaced and who have lost their homes, and many of them also their own family members, and they do not have an opportunity to study. We have received them here in Chennai, and they are placed in Sacred College. They are placed in Don Bosco College, Yelagiri, Dharmaburi, and Stella Maris College. And we should appreciate the effort for the provincial and all of us. In fact, when for provincial and myself and for the Leo who takes care of them, when we were sitting and just before sending them to the respective colleges, when we were here and they were playing the hymn, Lord, make me an instrument of peace, many of them were shedding tears. Many of them were shedding tears and probably thinking about what they have lost and how a peaceful world can be created. Is it possible? So that is why. So I find that this, and also I appreciate the organizers for having restructured the program. They could have said, no, we don't have time, and we already announced, and we need the entire day and all that. They could have said, and they could have forced us to change the date, but they have been very accommodative. That only shows that the theological reflection that takes place in Don Bosco Kavarapete is a very, very wonderful way in which they are able to educate and form our young brothers into both deep reflection as well as praxis. And also now we are going to invite students also from other provinces. That's what has been promised to us. We will be having students from other provinces because the theological reflection receives a local contextual training, but at the same time looking at a global context. So therefore, we will teach them the local language and culture in Tamil, but also we will have a global outlook. That is what we have decided, and we will continue to go ahead. So my time starts now. Lourdes, Father Lourdes, you have given me half an hour. Okay, so dear participants, just I have three questions or three parts of my keynote address. First, I would like to answer overall assessment, because this seminar is about 10 years, a decade of change, a decade of new era in the church. Everybody's talking about it. I want to answer with you, or you answer for yourself. Is it true? What exactly has happened in this 10 years after Pope Francis has taken charge? So I answer it in the form of a question. Is it a decade of tsunami? Tsunami is an experience that we all understand. Is it a decade of tsunami or a gentle wave? Because the organizers gave me a topic, talk about the Pope Francis wave that is sweeping the church and all that. So okay, I said, is it really a wave or a tsunami? Because everybody thought in the beginning it was going to be a tsunami. So how shall we think? Yeah, so that is the first part. Secondly, I will briefly outline the theological vision of Pope Francis, the main touch points, the important contribution that he has made to theological reflections. The pastoral, yes, we all understand what he has done, and also the Reformation. But the theological, and each of these topics, I'm sure the consecutive speakers will go a little more deep into that. And finally, conclude whether this wave, is it going to be continuous or it is going to just die out? So that is the three areas that I would like to briefly touch. And once my time is over, I conclude and step down and for other speakers. The first one, has it been a decade of tsunami? Now, when I talk to young brothers or young sisters or young people, I tell them, when you fall in love, it is not an earthquake, it is a tsunami. It's a tsunami. You are not in control. You don't know what is happening, and it's drastic. Okay. So how shall we think and assess and imagine about 10 years of Pope Francis' papacy? Several imageries come to my mind. Liberation theologian Leonard de Boeuf has called Pope Francis a new springtime for the church, indicating how, following the spirit of St. Francis, he is leading the church to serve the poor, to promote peace, and adopt an ecological spirituality. Papal biographer, now you have very nice books written by Austin Yveret, had initially called him the great reformer and a radical pope. Everybody was speaking about that. Having the potential to deliver far-reaching reforms in the Catholic Church. But later, he preferred to project him as a wounded shepherd because of the humble and humanistic way he has been inspiring and leading the church. What initially looked in the first years a thunderbolt revolution is turning out to be a tender transformation, a loving transformation in tune with people's struggles and pastoral realities. Now, dear friends, after 10 years of his pontificate, in my assessment, the symbol of the wounded shepherd fits well with Pope Francis, because in all the changes and redirection he has initiated in the church so far, his aim was to put his Lord and Master Jesus Christ at the center of the church and make everyone, especially the weak and the excluded people, welcomed and accepted as part of the big human family. I draw this biblical and theological image from Prophet Isaiah, who indicated that Jesus is the Heavenly Father's wounded shepherd, because through his wounds and the cross, we have all received life and healing. Isaiah chapter 53. Jesus has shown that we cannot take away suffering without entering it. That is the reason why Pope Francis has carried out these changes, many changes that you will hear in the coming talks. More like a loving father who accompanies his children towards higher spiritual moral grounds, rather than like an army general who bulldozes his utopian agenda through force. Be the change you want to be. That is what Mahatma Gandhi said, and in many ways Pope Francis embodies that. Let me conclude this first part of this reflection on the decade of Pope Francis with a small episode, small but very telling about who exactly Pope Francis is. In April 2014, in the run-up to the Synod on the Family, Pope Francis makes a phone call to a lady called Jackie Lisbona in San Lorenzo, Argentina. He was reaching out to her in response to a letter she had written 6 months ago, explaining her difficult family situation and her concerns about violating church norms and rules, because she was living with a divorced man for 19 years and already had 2 children. But the problem is, the new parish priest comes to her church, told her not to receive communion because it is against canon law and the church rules. But during the 10-minute telephonic conversation, Lisbona said, Pope had assured her that there was no problem. Don't worry. Don't worry about the parish priest. You can receive communion, but only go to another parish and for communion and receive communion. That exactly is the Pope Francis. Now you understand, okay? So immediately what happened was, the media world created a controversy about the episode. In the US Washington Post carries a news item next day. Did Pope Francis just call a lady and say that divorced Catholics can take communion? Headlines. The conservatives within the church, many cardinals whom he is fighting with, within the church criticize the Pope for going against the magisterium on the indissolubility of the marriage and for opening the floodgates for division and schism. Yet Pope Francis knew very well that he is called to reflect Christ, the Good Shepherd, the wounded shepherd, in reaching out the least with mercy. He wanted to create a culture of revolution, of mercy in the church, and all Christians to become missionaries of mercy. So therefore, dear fathers, brothers, sisters, the person and the papacy of Pope Francis challenges to re-examine our Christian life, understanding of theology, and method of doing theology, theologizing if you want it, to live out the gospel in a world that is often marked by division and suffering. That brings to the conclusion my first part of the reflection. The second, the theological vision of Pope Francis. To truly understand the theological vision of Pope Francis and the significance of his papacy, let us begin by acknowledging the unique historical context in which Pope Francis assumed the papal office. In 2013, the Church was facing a world in transition, a world characterized by economic disparities, environmental crisis, political upheaval, and a growing sense of disconnection and alienation. It was against this backdrop that Cardinal Bergoglio of Argentina was elected Pope Francis. In fact, in his first moment as Pope, he chose the name that would come to symbolize his papacy, Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi. In doing so, he signaled his intention to lead the Church with humility, simplicity, and a profound concern for the poor and marginalized. His choice of name was a powerful declaration of his theological vision, one that has continued to unfold over the past 10 years. In fact, his theological vision can be encapsulated in 4 fundamental areas, which I will briefly outline. The first is mercy and inclusivity. Second is discernment and synodality. Third, social justice and care for our common home. And finally, a culture of encounter. I'm not going to dwell deep into these themes because it will be dealt later by the consequent speakers. Pope Francis first is a Pope of mercy that we all understand. He famously declared the Jubilee Year of Mercy in 2015, inviting the Church and the world to contemplate the boundless mercy of God. His apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, in many ways called the Papal Manifesto. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. When he assumed the office, his first exhortation was Evangelii Gaudium. That outlines what is going to be his papacy. Challenged to embrace a culture of encounter and to reach out to the peripheries where those on the margins of society dwell. In doing so, he reminded that mercy is not a theoretical concept but a lived reality. In Evangelii Gaudium, he declared, the Church must be a place of mercy freely given, where everyone can feel welcomed, loved, forgiven, and encouraged to live the good life of the gospel. And Pope Francis has demonstrated this mercy through his pastoral approach, showing compassion to those who are marginalized and suffering. His outreach to the refugees, migrants, prisoners, those living in poverty, has served as a powerful reminder the gospel's call to love our neighbor. He has sought to create a more inclusive church that welcomes all, regardless of their circumstances or background. In fact, very strongly, his statement in Evangelii Gaudium is that church is not a tall house. When you go in your highways, you have to pass through tall plazas. There you pay money, then you are let inside. So he says church is not a tall plaza, tall house. It is a house of the Father where there is a place for everyone with all their problems. Don't exclude anyone. Don't exclude anyone. Embrace everyone. That is the first important trajectory of a theological vision. Second, discernment and synodality. Pope who is a Pope of mercy and inclusivity is also Pope of discernment and synodality. The theme, discernment, is so central to all his addresses, homilies, encyclicals, and apostolic exhortations that it can be used as a hermeneutical key to unlock the many steps he has taken to reform the church. If you understand the many reforms that he has undertaken or he is undertaking, you have to understand the word discernment. What exactly means by that? The word discernment, for example, is cited 44 times in Amoris Laetitia, 37 times in Christus Vivit, and in Gaudete et Exultate, a full chapter is dedicated to discernment. So like that, if you see, discernment becomes very important theological vision for. So moreover, Francis' theological vision, discernment is God's gift given to every baptized person. This is very important to understand his theology. It's not a monopoly of the theologians to discern, to solve moral problems, church, administrative problems. He says every baptized person is capable of doing his or her own discernment. Church is only expected to form conscience, not replace them. That is a strong understanding of what he says about discernment and synodality. In your discussions and further deliberations, you could look into that. So by this theological movement, Pope Francis has brought to the forefront the much forgotten Catholic principles of the sacredness and inviolability of informed conscience, as well as the moral principle of graduality, according to which people are encouraged to grow closer to God and His plan in a step-by-step manner, rather than expecting perfection in a single step. That is the reason why he is able to invite the entire church to go for a pastoral conversion, to integrate all this diversed, remarried, giving them communion. He will say communion is not a reward, but it is, it is a nourishment and a medicine for the sick. So therefore, why you want to deprive them of that? Now, of course, then you will get into controversy, and in fact, in that document, he will not mention it in the main text. You will go to foot number 321. Now I understand. Somewhere there, he will say all this. So he doesn't want to antagonize the conservatives, but at the same time, he has a heart to reach out to and integrate. So that is Pope of discernment and synodality. And we understand how just in 1st October, they are starting with a retreat. A journey that began in the 2021, now will conclude in 2024, and he has led the entire church step by step towards reflecting about a synod about synodality. That is the caliber and theological vision of Pope Francis. And third, social justice and care for our common home, that we all understand. Integral to Pope Francis' theological vision is a deep commitment to social justice. He reminds us that gospel calls us to work tirelessly for a more just and equitable world. His critique of throwaway culture, idolatry of money, challenges to confront societal ills that perpetuate poverty, inequality, and human suffering. The Church under Pope Francis has been a vocal advocate for the rights of the poor and vulnerable. His exhortation to care for those on the margins of society reflect a profound theological commitment to the preferential option for the poor, a central theme in the Catholic social teaching. Additionally, Pope Francis' theological vision is inseparable from his call to address the urgent environmental crisis. Now we all understand that how he's one of the first Pope who has called the entire attention of not the church, entire world to this problem of environmental crisis. And he wrote beautiful words in Laudato Si: the climate is a common good belonging to all and meant for all. And finally, the fourth important trajectory of a theological vision of Pope Francis' culture of encounter. Pope Francis has consistently emphasized the need for the church to engage with the world in meaningful ways. He advocates for a culture of encounter and encourages dialogue with those of different faiths and worldviews. His commitment to interfaith dialogue has helped to build bridges of understanding and cooperation in diverse and interconnected world. In the beautiful video that we saw, see how images that he's able to dialogue with Muslims, he's able to dialogue with Orthodox and different sections of the world and religions, and that is what Pope Francis, and it is integrated into his theological vision. And he encourages dialogue, respect, and understanding between people of different faiths and worldview. In his encyclical, he mentions Laudato Si. He says, interdependence. And that's kind of a leadership that he gave during COVID-19. He was not just focusing on the church, he was assuring hope and leading the entire world during the global crisis, Corona. And he said, and there in that time he was always he was emphasizing the word of that we are all interconnected people. If you are having COVID, surely somebody else will get it, even if he's rich or poor. democratizes everything. We are interconnected. If we were thinking it is in China, but in next month it came to Chennai. So it's an interconnected world. Now we hear it is already in Germany. I don't know when it is going to come again. Okay, so this is what he has been saying very strongly. We are interconnected, and interdependence obliges to think of one world with a common plan, respecting the rich and the poor, respecting especially the vulnerable and the neglected. And now I finally, to conclude the concluding session, you and I can answer the question whether the wave that Pope Francis has started, is it going to continue? The continuing wave of Pope Francis. As we contemplate the theological vision of Pope Francis and celebrate the many achievements of Pope Francis' papacy, it is important to recognize the challenges and criticism that have arisen during his papacy. His pastoral approach and willingness to engage with complex issues, particularly regarding issues such as divorce and remarriage, abortion, homosexuality, contraception, and other issues, have sparked debates within the church and society. Some have expressed concerns about doctrinal matters, while others have questioned his theological interpretations and validity. These debates within the church have highlighted the tension between tradition and doctrines and pastoral accommodation. Notably, Pope Francis has also undertaken significant steps towards reform within the Vatican, addressing issues of transparency, accountability, financial stewardship. These challenges have at times strained the unity of the church, but they have all served as opportunities for dialogue, growth, and deeper understanding. Furthermore, the ongoing clerical abuse crisis has been a painful and challenging chapter in Pope Francis' papacy. While he has taken steps to address this crisis, the healing wounds and the restoration of trust remain ongoing challenges. It is crucial, however, to view these challenges in the context of Pope Francis' commitment to dialogue and openness. He has always encouraged and continues to encourage to engage in respectful and honest discourse, recognizing that theological reflection is an ongoing and dynamic process. Theological reflection and theologizing, if I may say, according to Pope Francis, are more like a flowing river rather than a stagnant pond. The debates and discussion that he has started within the church serves as an opportunity for growth, deep understanding, and ultimately a more faithful response to the challenges of our time. Let me conclude. I started with Jackie Lisbona, and the lady who made a phone call and to whom he answered and all that. Here was a conversation between a Mother Superior, a Mother General, and Pope Francis. Recently, just in a run-up to this synod, he asked, how are the sisters, how are your sisters, how your nuns are doing, Mother Superior? That was the question of Pope Francis. Mother Superior answers, Your Holiness, we are concerned, worried about the synod that is going to happen. What's going on? Do you want to send some sisters for the synod? Because immediately he will announce some names so that they can be participants, just as he appointed our rector major as a cardinal, no? So he has the power and he will do that. So therefore he is saying, do you want to send some superiors to the synod? No, Papa Francis, Mother Superior says, we are afraid you are going to change the sisters and the doctrine of the church. So therefore, I am afraid to send the sisters for this synod. So that is the type of sometimes resistance and the pastoral conversion that we are not willing to undertake, but Pope Francis very much wants us to do that. As we continue our discussions, dear fathers, dear sisters, and my dear students of theology, at this theological symposium, let us draw inspiration from Pope Francis' example, because he not just talking about changes, but he is also the change, and he is leading us by example, and consider how his theological vision can guide us in our own lives and ministries. May we too be the angels of mercy, reconciliation, justice in a world that is in desperate need of these transformative qualities. Pope Francis is a transformative leader, and today this seminar should invite us for a pastoral conversion, that we too, like him, may become a leading transformative leader in our own circles. Thank you for this opportunity. May God bless you and bless the proceedings of this seminar and symposium.
We thank for the John Alexander for the wonderful presentation. It's a capsule he has given. All of us have swallowed it. This capsule will help us to go through the symposium. I would like to honor him with Ponade, thanking him for the wonderful presentation.
May I invite Father M.U. John, the birthday boy here, because he donned me up a shawl. Now I would like to don him a shawl on the stage. Please come, Father.
Thank you, dear Father John Alexander, for setting the symposium on a very exciting and enriching sail, capturing the wide horizons of Pope Francis's vision and mission. I have a dream, a speech immortalized Martin Luther King Jr. in history. Similarly, I wish of a church that moves out of itself to the existential peripheries and gets wounded, than a self-referential church that is locked within and becomes sick. Is a dream that makes Pope Francis a creative and credible leader. We are privileged to have Reverend Father Bosco Ryan, Dean and Professor at Sacred Heart Seminary, Pundamalli, to enlighten us on Pope Francis's vision of. Let us turn our attentive ears to his speech. May I invite Father Bosco Ryan to the stage. May I also call upon Reverend Father Stanley Jayakumar, the registered DBTC, to moderate this session and lead the fourth discussion after the talk.
Reflection on the Church has been central to the Roman Catholic Church at least since the Second Vatican Council, also for the ecumenical world. It is fitting that the very first talk addresses this topic. And we are with us Father Bosco Ryan, the Dean and the Professor at Sacred Heart Seminary, Pundamalli, to enlighten us on this topic. I wish all of us a very fruitful learning. Welcome, dear Father.
Good morning, one and all. You are going to hear this and you're probably wondering, what am I going to person whose thought is incomplete in the sense of open-ended thinking. So Pope Bergoglio, I just put it in inverted commas, has become what he is not through intellectual prestige and worldly qualities, but because of the human ordeals and the deep spiritual and pastoral roots of Jesuit Bergoglio. So when he was an archbishop in Buenos Aires, he went through a lot of problems. I will not dwell on that. Maybe all of you know all about it. And he was accused of not protecting his Jesuitical church was in need of dire reforms, just like Saint Francis before him. At that time also, there was a lot of turmoil in the church. And at this time, he also, Ignatius, realized there's a great turmoil. The hierarchy needs to be, let us say, reformed. And some great struggles were against corruption, venality, spiritual lassitude, inertia within the Roman Catholic Church. So Ignatius insists on an extremely high level of academic preparation for mission and ministry, for instance, was a deliberate response to the relatively poor education of the much of the clergy of his time, and that's how they got into education. Father Stanley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sahai. And so this is what was the focus then, and it's still the focus of theirs now. And that's why even now many Jesuits, we tell them, Father, can you do this, can you do that? Yes, if they're free, immediately they're there to help us out. And it's also happened with the Father also, and I had recourse to him for some help sometimes. Okay, so this was the three things they were they wanted to do. The first and foremost goal was dramatic document about the way his papacy would unfold and the direction in which he would lead the church, the evangelizing missionary way. Here the roots of his synodal plan also for the church is evident. So the synod had not come into existence, or rather into the jargon of the church, till much later. But the traces of that is there even in this Evangelium Gaudium, where in 269 he says, Jesus himself is the model of this method of evangelization, which brings us to the very heart of his people. Oh, sorry. So, how good it is for us to contemplate the closeness which he shows to everyone. If he speaks to someone, he looks into their eyes with deep love and concern. So these are all very, very characteristic of our Pope. And moved by his example, we want to enter fully into the fabric of society, sharing the lives of all. So listening, that's what synodality is all about, listening, is it not? So it's already there, helping them to materially and spiritually in their needs. So he says, go get your hands dirty. Don't sit armchairs and theologize and things like that. Get out. And weeping with those who, rejoicing with those who rejoice, weeping with those who weep, arm in arm with others. We are committed to building a new world. So that's it. But we do so not from a sense of obligation, not as a burdensome duty, but as a result of personal decision which brings us joy and gives meaning to our lives. So this was his first talk and first, let us say, ideas. Now we come to this particular, this little slide that I made. It's all very, let's say, amateur. So please excuse me, this is the first time I'm doing it. Of course, I have the help of my seminarians. So the rock, the foundation on which the whole, let us say, vision of his is what's there at the corner, the foundation. So a renewed personal encounter with Jesus Christ, okay? In each and every one of us, it's our duty to encounter him and let Jesus encounter us. In daily prayer, he says, each Christian must call out to him, save me once more, Lord, with your redeeming love and embrace. So that particular aspect of his is the very foundation, an encounter with Jesus. That's what he says again and again, everywhere. And then we have his all, the ethos of the Jesuit himself that want to go out on mission. And we see the church now at the present, it's darkened, it's in, there's no light in it. So it's in a dark place and there's so much of problems here, divisions and indifference and people, the church bleeding white, people are leaving the church like anything. So most of Europe is now empty, the churches in Europe are empty, they become museums. And I just, some time ago I read that in London alone, 500 churches, including many Catholic churches. This is, I'm talking about 5-6 years ago, before COVID. 500 churches were razed to the ground and Muslim mosques and Hindu temples were built on them. So which goes to the problem that we have. So Europe, so that's why he said, get out of Europe, move out to the peripheries, move to the various Asian countries and African countries. And of course, then this is the road forward. The road is synodal way. So participation, communion, and mission. So this is the synodal way and the way of being church now. So you participate, everybody comes in. And what are the targets? Okay, where is the targets? Target includes everyone, the peripheries, the vulnerable, all these people that he talks about so much. It's inclusive. So just like how we saw Father Alexander gave us about this married woman receiving, coming divorced and living with somebody else. So he's there to break norms, go out and include people. And in this, I must make a comment, it's a personal reflection, that here he seems to be doing what the early church did. They had no doctrines for 300 years. There was no thing about Jesus Christ, 100% man and 100% God, and Christology and all these things, Trinity and such things. There was just these apostles and these people who were disciples of the apostles and let us say learned from them, just went out and the message of Christ spread like wildfire. So we all know about Corinth, and Corinth was such a dirty place, and they just brought the people in. And they brought also people in from Philippi. All those places were pagan countries or other which had no morality, absolutely, and might was right and so many things. If you have read history, you will know that at that time of the Christian infusion into Rome, they found in a drainage 500 fetuses which had been aborted. So abortion was, even there it was happening. And so all those people had come into the church. So that's where he's going, I think, right to the origins. He's taking us. And that's what happens in every corporate world. So even in our own chapters, we go back to our origins. We go back to see if we are living according to the Constitution or not. So this is exactly, I think, what what Pope Francis is doing, taking us back to the early church. And so what should be the attitude or ethos of a synodal church? Okay. So once again, I think here he places holiness of life, and that is perseverance and constant conversion in the Lord, to the Lord. Okay, a humble listening spirit of one another, and through this, joy and humor and life. Okay, in all this we have keep in fidelity to the gospel. We receive his mercy, and we also dialogue with one another, dispensing mercy. This will be the kind of church that he wants. So, and that will be the ethos. And this church is bright and beautiful. It draws attractive, unlike the church here now, which has got a heart but it's blackened. But here the church now, the synodal way of being is going to lead to that kind of a church. And what kind of a church is going to be? A church which goes forth. The entire people of God proclaims the gospel, and they will be spirit-filled evangelizers, including everybody. So the target people are included. So this about, I think, sums up the vision of Pope Francis now. The rest are all details, and since we have lost so much of time, I would take the questions. Maybe I can answer you with the questions which come up now. So is that all right, Father? Because I've also conducted seminars. I know how you all pins and needles for time.
So thank you, dear Father, for a wonderful and insightful talk on Pope Francis and his vision for the church and the influence of the Jesuit formation on his life and mission. It's time, the audience, to raise your questions and ask clarifications from the speaker. Kindly be precise when you raise your questions. Yeah, Sister DJ Margaret.
Thank you for the presentation on the vision of Pope Francis. A question I am also aware of it. What do you think those peripheries that he is especially focusing and in his vision, and what are the efforts that he is taking along with his collaborators?
That's there in the document that I've made. And the first target for him is the people inside the church already. So those who have left the church, and he wants the pastors to go after them, like the good shepherd went after a sheep. So very many times we can see nowadays, if somebody goes outside the church, he says they don't have faith, they're left. And so we try not, or rather we are very reluctant to go after them. And so he is asking us to go after them. That's the first set of people. And then of course he says there's also people to be evangelized. There's three sets of categories I've given already in the paper. Just give me a time, I'll just take it out and read it for you. So it's on page 4. The first place we mention the area of ordinary pastoral ministry, the faithful who regularly take part, but seldom taking part in worship. That's the people. Ordinary pastoral ministry seeks to help believers to grow spiritually. So that's the first thing. The second area is baptized whose lives do not reflect the demands of baptism. So those are the people he's the second target. So he's telling them, we go after them, we go and bring them, speak with them, give them a chance to speak. So that's what listening is all about, and discerning what they're saying, and so on and so forth. And of course, finally, those who have never, let us say, met with the Pope, heard of the of Christ at all. So this is what I tell the boys also. Make friends with Hindus. How many Hindu friends do each of us have? First question. Very few. We are limited to this circle. And if at all we do have Hindu friends, it's very superficial. So we make friends with them. We talk deeply with them. That's one way of approaching them in the interreligious dialogue and all this. And we don't hold on. We are open to listening to them. So that's how he says to go after them. So quite a few times people who have left the church in a huff, they have had some problem with the parish priest, they don't want to come back. So if we are really worthy Christians, especially pastors, we should go after them. You might get brickbats, you might get curses, but the Lord himself was cursed. Why not you and me? Does that answer your question, sister? Or is it
Father, one of the things, when we think about Pope Church, so that hierarchical model of church,
yes.
and he's speaking about this new theology of priesthood that we need to develop, because everything is centered on ordination. Instead, baptism and confirmation should be the
Into the process. So that's in the paper there. The second part I've talked about is the how to be a synodal church. What is the parameters? So, and that's where it is. Several issues, okay, clericalization and clerical life amongst the laity, and no need of theology, keeping theological reflection open to new vistas, okay. We have to revisit the proposals of Cardinal Newman, whom I studied very thoroughly, and his was to go out to the people. So he says, your baptismal vows make you equal to those people. You're just given something extra for the Eucharist and for the sacraments. So that doesn't put you above them in any way. So we are all the same, but we have to focus on the people who have left and the people who are really suffering, who are there. We must go out to make, not to boast, but I tried to make sure that I was, for every BCC meeting I was there. So that's one way we can push forward peripheries and change a whole way of operating. Yes, Father.
The last question.
Just to add more to this, maybe in my talk also I will highlight the ordained ministries and the non-ordained ministries, which means though there are those only ordained members can perform. There are non-ordained ministries, which means instituted ministries, which is based on baptism and confirmation. So very clear distinction. Now, Pope Francis, he bases himself on what can be done for those who are receiving baptism and confirmation. In what level can we include them into performing ministries? So exactly that's where he underlines and highlights and performs also, gives space for others to, I will also highlight maybe in my talk, one or two, particularly becoming lector and acolyte, open to others, not priesthood, but before that. So before it was not open to that. Now he is basing himself on what can we do much more for the common baptism, which is a common priesthood.
And even the deacons. So he's trying to expand the boundaries of the deacons also. I'm not mistaken. Not yet, though. There's study going on about it. Yeah. So there's a lot more that I prepared. So since there was shortage of time, it's all here in the document. You can read it when I send it across to you.
So any more question? One short one.
The brothers
Father,
did not
yes,
ask.
the last one. Yes.
He was my professor.
So thanks, Bosco, for your insightful talk. My question is, Pope is very inspirational, but some people expect him to be more decision-making. As apostles, for success to apostles, you must give what Jesus wants to do. So because when we listen to the apostles, we are listening to Christ. So that is what some of the lay people say. You should give decisions regarding what is right and wrong. Then we can be helped to act. Is that a feeling that is true?
Well, like I said in the beginning there in the talk, I said, Father, I think it's going back to the early church model. So at that time, catch them and cleanse them. That's, I think, it's in his mind. So like I said, prostitutes and everybody came into the church and into the fold. And he didn't put a great, let us say, strictures on them, statutes. Rather, he welcomed them, and then they were catechized and cleansed, and they were told things. So the first thing for the Pope, this Pope, I believe, is to get them in, and then cleanse them. That's what happened in the original church also. They were first accepted Christ, then they were evangelized, then they were catechized. Catechized was a long process of 3 years in the early church. So, and that time they were taught the morals and everything. We can clean them up later. And like you said, he now delegate his authority to the bishops. So each local church, each region, you look after it, and you make the decisions. You have already the statutes or constitution, and you know all your moral theology and everything. So make sure that you don't go too far off the line. And this, I think, would be the answer to what you asked, Father. I hope something has made sense there. The Pope is more and more, because we have lost so many people from the church itself. So first bring them back in, and then we can talk about catechizing them. Because like I said, I was also talking to somebody else. I'm taking classes for lay people. Just a few are interested in to know about our faith. And it's not conducive. Very few want to come forward. Just a handful people come. So he wants more and more people to come and learn about Christ and know Christ. So that's his focus, I feel, now. So, and as the church goes by, it'll become a more and more, let's say, all these decisions and all those, let's say, the way that you have to go, the moral principles that you have to uphold, will be told later.
So once again, we thank Father for his wonderful presentation. And as a token of appreciation on behalf of Becky community, DBTC, I would Father.
Thanks to you, dear Father Bosco, for the insightful presentation and interesting explanations. Thanks also to our register for wonderfully moderating this session. Dear sisters and brothers, let us take a break for the refreshments, and the next session begins at 11:05 a.m. Please be back on time.
So as you go out, you will also find the books on display for sale from DBTC publications written by the professors, so you can avail yourselves of the discount that is available. Thank you.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera. Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera. fratelli e sorelle,
Salesian Sisters of Chennai Province,
buonasera.
address this academic year.
women, recognizing their fundamental role in the formation and the continuity of culture, in spirituality, in community, in families, in all the areas of social life. He says, women's leadership must be fully assumed in the heart of the church, recognizing and said, let's go back to the strength of a woman. We have to take her seriously and not to use her only as a makeup advertisement. Please, this is an insult to the woman, for everyone present and all the women in the world. The woman is made for greater things, for both in the church as well as in the society. Within that sub-point, women religious, he says, pillars of the church. For Pope Francis, women are the pillars of the church. When speaking of women in the church, one cannot fail to think of women religious and the appreciation that the Pope Francis has shown for consecrated women. Throughout the century, women religious have dedicated their lives to the service of the weak, the poor, the marginalized. They were the people who have taken the gospel values. They were the evangelizers going even to the remotest place. And they have made the search for Jesus Christ the motivation of their existence. Religious life, especially women religious. These topics include the possibility of female diaconate, care for initial formation, interculturality as an expression of the synodal path, and the sensitive issues of abuses of different types that is taking place in the church. These interactive meetings with the religious women reveal the pontiff's desire to embrace the deep work that we do. At least men appreciate this part of time. A church without women is like the group of apostles without Mary. Women's presence in church life is not a mere feminist claim, but a right, stemming from the baptism and the charism that the Holy Spirit has endowed us with. Okay, everyone. Okay, he feels that there should be certain fundamental attitudinal shifts in us, first of all, in women religious, so that their presence, life, and mission in the church be more valued. Service to the church, not servitude. This is one point that he is focusing on. Pope Francis' commitment to be a voice for religious women who in some parts of the world still experience the frustration and humiliation of clerics treating us women, especially women religious, as servants. This is the time, please take into consideration, we are all equals, right? Treat the religious women, especially with respect and real due respect and honor. While addressing the International Union of Superior Generals, said, when a consecrated woman is asked to perform a work of servitude, the life and dignity of that woman are demeaned. Her vocation is service to the church, not servitude. Okay, all of us are called to serve the church, both men and women. Yeah, we are not called to really to treat someone low as a servant. These strong and clear words highlight the need to continue fighting for the dignity of religious women and the need for respectful, fair, and correct cooperation and collaboration is needed for all of us. Okay. Second, telling, don't be old maids, be mothers, not spinsters. Okay. Another strong point of Pope Francis is that women religious are called to be spiritual mothers. And already. Okay, he addressed the consecrated women from around the world that they must be spiritual mothers, make it a fertile chastity which generates spiritual children in the church. The consecrated are mothers. They must be mothers, not spinsters. Then, 1.5, the key role that the women are called to play in interfaith dialogue and peace. Pope Francis said, women have an essential role to play in interreligious dialogue, given their natural ability to build relationship and fraternity or sisterly love and care, making their involvement necessary in all areas of society. On June 9, 2019, while addressing the role of women in the church, Pope Francis pointed out, valuing the role of women, educating in fraternity and dialogue as main areas of reflection for discussion. He said that within the complex society marked by plurality and globalization, there is a need for greater recognition of the ability and contribution of women to educate to universal sisterly and brotherly love. In term, it's called fraternity. The Pope insists that today, more than ever, it's necessary that we recognize women's key role in interfaith dialogue
and peace. Because, why? Because women possessing special characteristics can offer important contribution to dialogue with their ability to listen, to welcome, to understand, and to offer generously their service. Therefore, it is much more facilitating. They can be greater facilitators for interfaith dialogue and peace. The Pope is convinced that women are able to freely put their gift at the service of the entire human community in building peace and harmony. However, the way that society understands the role of women in the family will favor their substantially contribution to promoting dialogue, unity, and peace in the world, because the problem begins at home, right? Once she is being treated as an equal and given all the rights, and then it will be also promoted in other sectors. In order to make women's roles more relevant in the church, he proposed some significant strategies. So what are those strategies? Pope Francis has made concrete significant strategies to include and appoint women to responsible position in the church more than any pope earlier than. Okay, he had really broken, no? He really done a very daring option. Sister Natalia in the as a general secretary, Sister Raffaella Petrini as a governor in the Vatican City, and Francesca as in the Secretariat of State. Okay. On 8th March 2015, the International Day for Women, the Pope signed a preface to the book Vita e Pensiero, stating that more female leadership is needed for a better world. That means more leadership is needed in the church first. Okay, then it will favor. One of Pope Francis' significant strategies is the synod meeting intended to give direction to women in the church. We are hopefully looking for really very positive outcome of this synod. In Lisbon in 2023, during this World Youth Year or Day, he said, Pope Francis said that he would like to see a seed for the world's future, a world where love is at the center, where we can see, we can sense and live that we are all brothers and sisters. Okay, so that should be the real goal of it. The radical nature of his message is evident in the following statement. He said, I want to see the church to get closer to the people. I want to get rid of this clericalism, which Father already spoke, this mundane, this closing ourselves off within ourselves, in our parishes, in our schools, in all our institutions. Okay, that's why he's asking us to go to the peripheries. The following are some of the areas in which Pope Francis wants to implement his strategies in favor of women's role in the church. First, shared mission and ministry. A doctrinal development has highlighted that a certain ministry instituted by the church are based on the common condition of being baptized. That is the starting point. Okay, so all of us are baptized, all of us are members in the church, all of us have got equal right and also equal responsibility. Noting that women were making a precious contribution to the church, Pope Francis has formally changed the law in the Roman Catholic Church, allowing women to administer communion and serve at the altar. That is a starting point. Okay, so it has to lead to the higher. The Pope also changed the clause in the canon law from layman to lay person, signifying that women can perform the ministry of lector and acolyte in Catholic services. Letting lay people, and in particular women, have the right to vote during this synod, he said there are going to be a new way of being a church that envision more co-responsibility in governance and the key of mission of spreading the Catholic faith. So we need to play both the role. To the question whether after the synod women will be allowed to become deacons in order to preside over some church services, the Pope refused to respond positively, frustrating some of those who had hoped for more fundamental reform during his pontificate. You may raise question. There are certain other problems he has to face. Second, recognize authority in administrative leadership. Pope Francis believes that more weight and more authority must be given to women, both in the church and the society. He stressed that the need for women not only to be heard, but also given recognized authority. So this leadership sharing is something very important if you really want to bring transformation in the society, starting from the church. He added that this reflected the way Jesus treated women, you know, isn't it? okay, and encourage people to work with more creativity and boldness towards giving women the recognition they deserve. We have not yet understood in depth what contribution that feminine genius can give us, that women can give to the society and also to us. Perhaps to see things that with the different eyes that complement the thoughts of women, because we are men and women, we are able to complement, the role that has to be well played. He has begun to lay the groundwork by choosing women to secretary, which we have seen will also be under secretaries, which could pave the way for more important position in the future. According to the report of this Gordon, the proportion of women employees in Vatican has increased, and even the governance position, it has during this Pope Francis tenure has really given a lot of improvement. This means that more than 1 in 4 employees at the Holy See is a woman. These figures refer to the 2 administrative units of the Holy See and Vatican City State together, because they are 2 different. The counts for the economy consist of 15 members, 6 of them are women. In 2019, Pope Francis nominated 7 female religious superiors to the dicastery for the Institute of Consecrated Life. Today at the Holy See, 5 women hold the rank of undersecretary and 1 holds the rank of secretary of a dicastery. Okay, this is Sister Alexandra Smerili. She's an FMA. Okay, so we are very proud. Our sister has been given this. She's in the dicastery for promoting integral development, and another biblical scholar is there, another Professor Emily Kuda. She's also in the Commission for Latin America. I am running because, then we know Natalie, who has been a sister who has been given this responsibility of even given the chance to vote. And we have Barbara, director as a museum. Raffaella Petrini, again she's a general of the governorate in 2022. And Mother General, former Mother General also is being appointed in one of the dicastery for bishop. Okay, they are supposed to elect the bishops. Okay, so Sisters Raffaella Petri and Sister Mother Yuan Rengo, and a lay woman, Mr. Maria Severino. Okay, Francis seeks to usher in more gender equality within the church's position of government and responsibility. Okay. So they are to participate in the process of selecting bishops. That is their job that they need to do. Then, increased presence, visibility and influence of women. The Pope has increased the presence, visibility and influence of women in the Vatican, which we have already seen. As noted earlier, in the 10 years of Pope Francis' pontificate, the number of women in leading position in the Roman Curia has tripled. The number of female employees and the share of the total staff have increased. That means he had opened the door, isn't it? So it will be on the increase. He had increased the number of women in top Vatican leadership positions. He has become the first Pope who has brought visibility to women in the church. Okay, according to Vatican News, the influence of women employed at the Vatican has risen significantly in the last 10 years. Never before has the number of female employees and the share of total staff has been higher. He has also affirmed that the Catholic Church needs more women in leadership position. It's not sufficient what it is when we see the proportion. Several times, however, he also warned against seeing the task of women in the church as well as in the Vatican from purely functionalistic point. Okay, this is also another danger that we face. Use and throw culture. Francis described this as a challenge for him to create spaces for women to take leadership in such a way that allow them to shape the culture, ensure that they are valued, respected and recognized. By setting a course in favor of women, Pope Francis ultimately wants Rome to become a model for the universal church in this aspect. Rome will bring in all the transformation possible. When you come to the parish, rigidity will be there, isn't it? So it has to, the flow should be top to bottom, bottom to top. That transformation actually has to take place. The significance of synod on women. With regard to synod, he is asking us that there should be a lot of parity, the involvement of women with regard to this. Okay, so Pope Francis intends to end the male hegemony in the leadership of Catholic Church. Okay, so he is with the opinion of constructing new structures and new vision for the church. What are the expectations of the women from the Pope Francis? That is what Pope Francis is doing. Our expectation. Okay, let us see. Recognize feminine genius, isn't it? Women are gifted, as he had been insisting upon. Women are gifted, therefore space and place should be created, recognize feminine, make them, their presence very active and broaden their presence. Because feminine genius is needed in all expression of both social and ecclesial life. Therefore, Francis, according to the, based on that statement of Pope Francis, women demand that feminine genius be recognized, given sufficient opportunity to place it at the service of the human, social and cosmic world. Then, inclusive feminine presence and inclusive participation. We understand what exactly we mean. The church has to expand the spaces for more incisive, that means it's really glaring, feminine presence in the church. They have to really give the space in all the aspect of church life, okay? Its mission, its celebration, sacrament, in all aspect of it. The church has to reevaluate the way authority is exercised by the hierarchy, okay? This is also time that some of you are already in the hierarchy, others are going to be in the hierarchy. Think how you are treating, how you will be treating. He says we need institutional reforms to eradicate clericalism, privilege that is afforded to clergy. He said clericalism is a very negative attitude. It requires complicity, something to be done by both the parties, because we are also very submissive and you are also very dominant. So equally the evil continues to exist. Okay, so that is the problem that we face. Therefore, the church to be truly an inclusive participatory community, both men and women serve in all the ministries of the church. Then, decisional role and relationship responsibility. Today's women are women because we know in all the social setting how well women do. But Pope Francis has not hesitated to increase women's participation in the ecclesial body by entrusting them a lot of responsibility and including them in decision-making processes. He has appointed several women whom we have already seen. The women desire, this is our desire, right? The women desire that Pope Francis ensure greater participation of women in church leadership position at the parochial, diocesan and curial level, all the levels of the church. Eliminate the triple form of abuse by the clergy. Okay, is very, this also is being insisted and we also demand. Half of the Catholics in the world are female. You think women are not coming to the church or not serving the society or the church, what will happen? Okay, they are often subjected to magical domesticity, abuse and oppression. Okay, on International Women's Day, he said, let us pray together so that women, every woman may be respected, protected and esteemed. Violence against women and mothers is violence against God himself. So all the evil done against women are evil done against women. Women who from a woman or from a mother took on a human condition. Okay, the leader of the church, Pope Francis, has to continue to eliminate this triple abuse by the clergy. One is the abuse of conscience, abuse of power and abuse of sex. Okay, so this we need to ensure that a safe environment is created in all our institutions. Then gender parity in synodal law, we feel we are not in equal number as a participant in the synod, but however we can recognize the presence of women in the synod. Okay, real equal participation could also be given. Pope Francis has given women a greater voice in the society, but he has to see this a key to ensure that women can have the proper role in the church alongside the bishops, priests and all consecrated. The church will create new conversation and will create new ways of making decisions within the church. Let me conclude a few further. Pope Francis' pontifical journey is mixed with a profound coherence and apparent contradiction. There is light as well as shade. Okay, so we have to discern rightly. In the first place, although his statement on women might betray a tendency toward gender stereotyping, Pope Francis clearly recognizes the consultative process towards various reforms will change the clericalism and careerism. Secondly, the Pope Francis' action will give evidence that he is not rigidly holding to tradition of excluding or dominating females. We know what had happened, how he washed the feet of the women. These are all example that he had already initiated the change in the canon law. Thirdly, there is a refreshing degree of humility in Pope Francis' writing and suggesting an openness to new possibility. His anthropology and opposition ordination without this dimension, Pope says, sadly becomes a church of old bachelors who live in isolation, incapable of love, incapable of fecundity. Okay, eighthly, women have the power to change the church for the better. He advocates for greater respect and honor for women. This demands a change in the mindset of men and also women, to get rid of this chauvinistic lifestyle, patriarchal mind, both inside and outside the church. Finally, women must feel protagonist and responsible on our part for the well-being of the church, to know how to integrate differences and work in ecclesial harmony. The Catholic Church, despite acknowledging the role of women and their contribution, and yet there is a certain hesitation to allow women to more responsible roles in the church. Pope Francis has given quite far in giving incisive role for women in the church. He could still go further in faith and relevance. As Mackley says, Pope Francis' 10 years record on women may not be fireworks of change many pray for, but it has been a movement. Movement is a movement. It will not stop. It will go on and on until we reach the shore. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sister, for your talk. And now we have about 5 to 10 minutes for exchange. So if you are ready with your questions, we shall begin immediately. Yes, Sabinson. Mic to Sabinson, please.
Thank you, dear sister, for your crystal clear presentation. And I have two questions, but I will integrate both. Anbiyam, the Tamil basic Christian community, has become Penbiyam these days. But when it comes to parish council or some decision making, they don't involve women. And where do we go wrong? Because when it comes to Anbiyam, we need women. When it comes to parish council, we don't need women. This is the mentality of Tamil, at least our Tamil mindset, I think. First question. Second question is, mothers are the first and best instructor of faith, and we have imparted faith from our mothers, most of us. And nowadays, the modern mothers, they fail to do so because they have not inherited the faith, because of which there is a lack of children coming to the church. There is no faith they don't even know to make the sign of the cross, most of the children, because modern mothers, they don't instruct them in faith. And how do the church and Pope Francis respond to this kind of situation?
The first one is Hanbiyam becoming Penbiyam, and all the parish councillors becoming Anbiyam, because only Angal are participating in that, isn't it? So this is who is at fault? Okay, is this because of the hierarchical mind and clerical mindset that we have? Problem is on both sides. Okay, women we don't take, when offered the leadership we don't take, and men also wanting to give all subsidies. All these groundworks only could be done. But now this is a time that we have to change. That's what they insisted, isn't it? It's not only doing something, all the tasks to be carried out. Even that's why we say shared mission. Anbiyam also is a mission of the church, and parish council also is activities of the church. So everywhere this equality should be exercised. Second question with regard to imparting the faith. It is not the responsibility of women only. It is a parent, father and mother. This is how we have inherited. Only mother has to be taught to the child to make the sign of the cross. Only the father has to take the child to the school. We have created these rules and regulations. It's a time that we break through in the family. If a mother is taking the child to the school, let father take the other. So that equal, that parity.
That why you are not sending them. So that is also, we need to reflect.
One thing is, see, you study a theology, there you get ordained and you are given a job. What is being done for women? Is it for the sake of studying that we study? That is why we are telling, give a equal opportunity in all levels. There is no scope, there is no hope, there isn't anything. Again, we will continue to do the servitude services only. Isn't it? Although now today many are sent to study theology, canon law, biblical studies, that proportionately it's not yet come. Because there is no hope. For what am I? If I am studying mathematics, I will be going here. If I am studying science, I go there. I do this. But what is the scope? I mean, I am talking with the real situation. But we have to get educated. We have to motivate our sisters, send them, because only then the changes will take place. That is on our part. This is looking at from the perspective of a real goal. We think there isn't any hope. But if you really want to make some real contribution in the church, to bring the transformation in the church, we need to prepare. We have to send our sisters to study. We have to think. We are trying. This year we have sent some of our sisters to do some online courses. We have to try. We need to have sufficient number of personal sisters, ability. No, it's not like for you it is a must. You cannot be ordained if you don't go through this. Isn't it? So we have to make some policy. We cannot make sisters if they don't go through that such kind of rules. If we bring in, then changes will take place. Thank you.
Father Praveen, the last question.
Thank you, sister, for your presentation. In the year 2016, Pope Francis had already called for a commission to study on women diaconate. And recently, years past, he was also asked about women ordination in US. And whenever there is women ordination, questions arising about women ordination, he always answers with the theology of Marian principle.
Yes.
And in your discussions, that never came out because he bases his reflections on this theology of Marian principle. What is your opinion about this theology of Marian principle?
See, priest, if you really understand in the right perspective, who is a priest? He is supposed to represent Jesus, isn't it? Therefore, we may give an answer. Mary is the first one to give Jesus. Okay. But today, the understanding of priesthood is totally different. Isn't it? What priesthood stands for today? How the priesthood is being exercised is a big question mark. Therefore, I do not know whether real Pope after the synod he will come to a proper decision, because there are people really fighting for it, isn't it? And people are wanting. Practically, actually, we see women do all that you do, except that consecration part that you do, isn't it? So that is why, I mean, on one place I said, women without church, without women is like a church without apostles, without Mother Mary. Okay, highlighting Mother Mary in the right perspective only will redeem. Okay, understanding her as one who gives Christ. If that is the real goal of priesthood, then it will be easy women to be ordained. But that is not the real. The goal of priesthood. Giving Christ is not it. Other than that, the rest of the things are being held upon. Okay, so that is a challenge, the difficulties that we face. And Pope also is wanting to bring in the change, transformation, but he is also struggling. You know how difficult to break the structures. Think of your own community, how difficult it is, how our own mindset to break through. So we really need valiant people to break through and bring in the changes needed. Thank you.
Those valiant people are already being seated in front of you. And we hope and pray that they really do their ministry as is expected on an equal level with everyone in the society. Thank you very much, sister, for your talk and the answers that you have given to the questions. We would like to thank you with a towel and a gift.
Thanks a lot, dear sister, for sharing profound breakthroughs and radical reflection on the indispensable role of women in the church and in the society. We are grateful to Father Pathiraj for skillfully leading the session as the moderator. Considering the social morality, the then Primate of Argentina said in May 2003, the inclusion or exclusion of the most fragile defines all economic, political, social, and religious projects. Every day we face the choice of being good Samaritans or indifferent travelers who pass by. Here we have a suitable speaker, Reverend Father Sahayaraj Stanley, professor at Arutkadal Santum, to illumine our hearts and minds on the topic Moral and Social Teachings of Pope Francis. Welcome to the stage, dear Father, with your words of wisdom. Let me also call upon Reverend Father Patrick Matthias, professor at the DBTC, to chair the session and to moderate the floor discussion after the talk.
My dear sisters and brothers, good afternoon. It's going to be 12, so good afternoon. And once again, a warm welcome. After Sister Margaret, we were together in Vidya Jyoti studying theology, and I was thinking about feminism, radical feminism, and we have heard a radical feminist. Now, before I go into my presentation proper, I just want to begin with a small little joke. Pope Francis is a down-to-earth person. It seems some time back somebody presented him Scotch whiskey, and the Holy Father was very happy. And it seems he commented, "Costa e veramente acqua santa." This is actually the holy water. And so he enjoyed that whiskey, it seems. So he's a man who is very down to earth. Now I am not going to say anything new, because what I am going to share with you is what we have been hearing, what we have heard from plenty of many writings, and this is my presentation. I have got 31 slides, I have got 30 minutes, and hope it will go on time. So this is how I have budgeted my time. So there will be a small introduction, and I would like to place this in context, three contexts: the question on Eucharist, the cry of the nature, and the reality of poverty. So three contexts, and then I would like to fix Pope Francis in the wide spectrum of compassion. So compassion for the people in wounded marital love, the phrase that I borrowed from Father Emmanuel from Kavarapete. So wounded marital love, that is, he uses this term in his doctoral thesis. So compassion for the wounded nature, compassion for the wounded poor, and then I would like to think aloud with you all and would like to offer some challenges, some 10 challenges, actually 9 challenges and 1 anxiety, and there will be a conclusion. So Martin Luther King Jr. once said the difference between a dreamer and a visionary is that a dreamer has his eyes closed and a visionary has his eyes open. There is a theologian from Germany, Johann Baptist Metz, many of you must have heard, and he talks about spirituality with open eyes, mysticism of open eyes. So I would like to also place Francis as a mystic, a mystic with open eyes. And he has written many things. I have just taken a few things. For example, 3 encyclicals, not exactly from Lumen Fide, but much from Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, and then 5 apostolic exhortations: Evangelii Gaudium, Amoris Laetitia, Gaudate Exultate, Christus Vivit, and Corrida Amazonia, beloved Amazon. Now the first context is from the marital context, where Pope Francis is truly a Pope of mercy. This is from Misericordia Vultus. Mercy is the very foundation of the Church's life. The Church's very credibility is seen in how she shows merciful and compassionate love. Mercy is the force that reawakens us to new life and instills in us the courage to look to future with hope. And we all know, we are all very familiar with this quote number 351 in Amoris Laetitia. In certain cases, this can include the help of the sacraments. Hence, I want to remind priests that the confessional must not be a torture chamber, but rather an encounter with the Lord's mercy. And as we all know, this is also a quote previously used by the Pope in Evangelii Gaudium, which dates back to Saint Augustine. The first context is from the marital area, and now I come to the second context, to economy. Again, this is very famous, a killing economy. The example that I am giving is from North India. This is from a Musahar community. The community eats rats because of abject poverty. Sometime back, even our own people in Tanjore, farmers, they were eating rats just to tell the world that they are also in poverty. So Mushair, I read from the slide, Mushair community is forced to eat rats, and we are baking plum cakes for Christmas, screamed Times Food. So this is a sad story of the Mushair community of North India, where this particular oppressed people are forced to eat rats because of their abysmal poverty. So roasting the rodents, you can say. Now I come to the third context. The third context is the context of environment. We all know Leonardo Boff, the Brazilian theologian, and this is perhaps the great daddy of Laudato Si. This book came in 2002. So Cry of the Earth and Cry of the Poor. And Joshimath, you must have heard this town. This town is in Uttarakhand, and today they say Joshimath is sinking, is going down. So I come back to the slide there. We have had enough of immorality and the mockery of ethics, goodness, faith and honesty. It is time to acknowledge that light-hearted superficiality has done us no good. When the foundations of social life are corroded, what ensues are battles over conflicting interests, new forms of violence and brutality, and obstacles to the growth of genuine culture of care for the environment. And we all know this famous statement, when the last tree has been cut down, when the last fish is caught, and the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that the human person cannot eat money. Now I'm expanding little bit the three camps, the three contexts. So comparison for the people in wounded marital love. Mercy and compassion are two great hallmarks of the church. James Keenan, a moral theologian teaching in Boston, he says, our distinctiveness as human person is found in the virtue of mercy. He says further that mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of others. Beautiful. Chaos of others so as to answer them in their need. Pope Francis seems to have entered into the shoes of these troubled remarried people and echoed their longings and spiritual yearnings. And we all know the Hebrew word for mercy, compassion, rahamim. And they say rahamim is plural, mercies. And Shakespeare will talk about the quality of mercy dropping down from heaven. So this is something very natural to the human person. Then compassion is an overarching theme for Pope Francis, as we all know. In all his writings, one can notice the thread of compassion woven beneath his texture and dexterity of words. In Evangelii Gaudium, for example, he writes that we need to accompany people, and this accompaniment must be steady and reassuring, reflecting our closeness and our compassionate gaze, which also heals, liberates, and encourages growth in the Christian life. My dear brothers and sisters, we all know this famous imagery, church as a field hospital. So the Holy Father writes, don't worry about high cholesterol, don't worry about sugar. The patient is dying, heal the wounds, heal the wounds, heal the person. So accompanying, discerning, and integrating weakness, the Pope talks in the 8th chapter of Amoris Laetitia. Now we come to the next one, the compassionate for the wounded nature. A sense of deep communion with the rest of the nature cannot be real if our hearts lack tenderness, compassion, and concern for our fellow human beings. It is clearly inconsistent to combat trafficking in endangered species while remaining completely indifferent to human trafficking, unconcerned about the poor, or undertaking to destroy another human being deemed unwanted. So the Pope goes on about the compassion, how we need to have compassion to the wounded nature. I've got a beautiful quote again from Laudato Si. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love that we may protect life and beauty. So compassion, the same thing we also read in Fratelli Tutti chapter 2, the stranger on the road, compassion, compassion. So to care for the world in which we live means to care for ourselves. Yet we need to think of ourselves more and more as a single family dwelling in a common home. Vasudeva Kudumbam, these words, even Modi uses this word. Such care does not interest these economic powers that demand quick profits. So the Pope writes, in this shallow, short-sighted culture that we have created, bereft of a shared vision, it is foreseeable that once certain resources have been depleted, the scene will be set for new wars. There may be few more wars like Ukraine war. So new wars, albeit under the guise of a noble claim. My dear sisters and brothers, I'm a student of English literature. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, there is a very beautiful mystical poet. She writes, "The earth is full of God, and every common bush is on fire. Those who see remove their sandals. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries." Hope you understand. The earth is full of God, and every common bush is on fire. Those who see the fire, they remove the sandals because it is a sacred ground. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries. Are we removing our shoes or plucking blackberries? We don't know. We have to ask. So Laudato Si again portrays the shared vision as an organic connection between generations. So justice between generations. So this is what I am hinting at. Or he says, I come back again, it is termed as justice between the generations. The Holy Father rightly points out the dangers and poisonous toxic hazards that we leave behind us as our shameful legacy to future generations. He says that development is not possible without intergenerational solidarity as well as intergenerational justice. Now we come to the third area, compassion towards the wounded poor. So this is something very beautiful. We are all theologians or students of theology. The Pope writes, for the church, the option for the poor is primarily a theological category rather than a cultural, sociological, political, or philosophical one. God shows the poor his first mercy. Inspired by this, the church has made an option for the poor which is understood as a special form of primacy. Without the preferential option for the poor, the proclamation of the gospel, which is itself the prime form of charity, risks being misunderstood or submerged by the ocean of words. This we read in Evangelii Gaudium. Sometimes we Jesuits talk a lot, chatterbox, blah, 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 blah. But are our speech, our words translate into action? I don't know. I have my own doubts. Oh, sorry. So the biblical understanding of God is that he is the God of the poor and God of the Anavim. The untold agonizing stories of the refugees. They say the Mediterranean Sea has become a deathbed, a cemetery for refugees. From 2014 onwards, some 20,000 refugees have drowned and died. So the sad saga of migrant female workers, children who are sold to the human trafficking agents, and all whose lives have been crippled and crushed, denied of a decent blossoming into a given cultural milieu, all are social sins. Again, if I want to quote Keenan will say, all our sins are social. So having their umbilical cord in poverty, born of some human person's greed and guilt. Again, to quote English literature, there's a poet called Thomas Gray. He has written a beautiful poem, Elegy written on a country churchyard. There he writes, full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its fragrance or sweetness on the desert air. So many babies, so many people, they die and then their stories become unheard of. So the Pope writes, let us not forget that our Father, the prayer that we every day use, let us not forget that the Our Father is the prayer of the poor. Let us love, and not with words, but with deeds. These are two core messages of Pope Francis on the first World Day of the Poor, which was celebrated on the 19th September 2017, which he initiated through his apostolic letter, Misericordia et Misera. One can see that the poor people have a special and privileged place in the heart of Pope Francis. My dear brothers, again, this is something I used to enjoy, and this shows that he was a novice master. Before becoming bishop, he was a novice master. The Pope writes, this is from Christus Vivit. We weep when we think of all those young people who have already lost their lives due to poverty and violence, and we ask society to learn to be a caring mother. Sister Margaret was hammering on this aspect, the motherly instinct, obviously. Salutations to her. So the worst thing we can do is adopt that worldly spirit whose solution is simply to anesthetize. There are WhatsApp, Instagram, Reels, so many things working like anesthesia. So anesthetize young people with other messages, with other distractions, with trivial pursuits. Perhaps those of us who have a reasonably comfortable life do not know how to weep. Some realities in life are only seen with eyes cleansed by tears. And he writes again, I would like each of you to ask yourself this question: can I weep? Can I weep? Try to learn to weep for all those young people less fortunate than yourselves. Again, the novice master in Bergoglio comes in here. Novice master in Pope Francis. If tears do not come, ask the Lord to give you the grace to weep for the sufferings of others. Father Bosco was talking a lot about Jesuits and Ignatius. Ignatius used to weep a lot, they say. That's what we read in our own testimonials. So, can I weep? Now, I come to my last area, the way forward, realizing the dreams and visions. Some challenges. Perhaps I think I will finish before time. So, some challenges, some 9 challenges, sorry. The first challenge, we are talking about the marital problems, whether we can give communion to the divorcees or not. So the conflict over receiving the Holy Communion is real and highly sensitive. Much has been said, discussed and debated. Perhaps the simple question would be, how would Jesus encounter these problematic but sincere people who come week after week to the Holy Eucharist, living faithfully in the second marital union and doing all they can to reconcile with the local church community? Obviously a challenge. The second challenge, that is the smell of the sheep. So finding solutions to moral problems related to marital life is not very simple. Obviously it is not very simple. Ask any moral theologian. When we say marital acts, they do not simply mean only the erotic sexual union that takes place between the man and the woman. Can the Catholic pastor make a few more efforts to smell the sheep and offer sound pastoral solutions instead of one size fits all, off the rack, tailor-made solutions? Second thing. The third one, we all know poverty kills, and poverty kills the joy and happiness of simple poor people. In his writings, the Holy Father calls for a new Nehemiah project. This is from his book, Let Us Dream. So he talks about the new Nehemiah project. In the book of Nehemiah, if you read, people come, they defend the city. After the city, they all come together, and the prophet asks them to celebrate, to have a feast. So at the end of the discourse, Nehemiah tells them to go to their homes and feast. Here, the Holy Father makes a pertinent point. He says that today our people lack joy. So that's why I'm here. I've given down, ill humor is no sign of holiness. That's what the Holy Father says in Gaudate et Exultate. So how are we going to be prophets of joy? Today we have many doomsday soothsayers, many prophets of doom. How are we going to be prophets of joy? Maybe another challenge to all of us. The fourth challenge. It is pointed out that canon law is always evolving, like a living organism. Experts point out that canon law can be changed or dispensed with except for those canons which are essentially a direct expression of teachings from divine revelation. Normally I don't tamper into this area. Canon law experts are here. So, but there are certain canons we cannot touch. But certain canons we have to deal with. So my question is, how are we going to move forward with the correct mixture of law and love? Obviously a question. So I've given also a small quote. My choices, including those related to the day-to-day aspects of life, like the use of a modest car, we all know Pope used to have a Ford, they say, are related to spiritual discernment that responds to a need that arises from looking at things, at people, and from reading the signs of the times. Discernment in the Lord guides me in my way of governing, says the Holy Father. Now the fifth one. After reading the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, our theologian, our famous theologian, Jesuit theologian Michael Amaladas, he asked this question: what is new in this pastoral discernment of Pope Francis? And Amaladas writes that the Pope's practical affirmation of pluralism is symbolized by the imagery polyhedron. My dear brothers and sisters, if you are very familiar with the Pope's writings, this imagery of polyhedron comes many times in many interviews, in many of his writings. What is polyhedron? It is a shape, it has got many heads. It doesn't have one head as such. So reality has got many faces. So will this love for pluralism continue with greater magnanimity without any condescending Catholic attitude, or I want to also put Catholic condescending attitude? So again, I just want to read from the quote. If globalization is a sphere where each point is equidistant from the center, then it is not good because it annuls each of us. But if globalization joins us as a polyhedron where we are all together but conserves the dignity of each, that's good. That's what Pope said when he came to our general congregation in 2016. And the sixth challenge, this has already been commented on. We are here to form consciences, not to replace them, tells the Holy Father in Amoris Laetitia. So morality is again always dynamic and not static. So Pope also says realities are more important than ideas. So we are here with Generation X. Many of you are born between 96 and 2010 perhaps. So we are here with Generation Z and Generation Alpha children. They are called digital natives. People are today seem to be born with mobile phones or tablets. So they are called digital natives. In this rapidly changing world, realities change constantly, and we are here on a common search. We search along with others. This is indeed a search and a challenge. And these four, these are called Bergoglian principles. This came in Evangelii Gaudium. So the time is greater than space. Unity prevails over conflict. Realities are more important than ideas, and the whole is greater than the part. And the seventh one, the church needs to be relevant and understand society in a better light. The Holy Father writes, a substantial number of young people, for all sorts of reasons, do not ask the church for anything because they do not see her as significant for their lives. They do not see any significance in being the church. So the Holy Father writes, they do not see her as significant for their lives. Some even ask expressly to be left alone. They find the presence of the church as a nuisance, even an irritant. So the church as a nuisance and irritant. This is from, again, Christus with number 40. So I have given a quote there. I am not now, nor I have ever been relevant. This is from James G. Marsh, one of the political scientists from the US, and it seems he was famous for his garbage can model decision making. So organized anarchy, planned chaos, programmed disruption. This is Catholic Church, some people say. So like throwing things to the dustbin, ideas were thrown and somehow we plan and evolve the decision making. So the question here is, how are we going to be relevant? I can ask the question to my own self. Am I relevant? I'm teaching in my Theologate. Am I relevant to my students? Is my teaching relevant to my students? So is the church relevant today? Obvious questions. Now I come to the eighth one. The Pope dreams of the theology of the people. I've given a book there, Theology, Pope Francis and the Theology of the People, Raphael Luciani. This Raphael Luciani is a lay theologian from Venezuela and a very fine person, works with Jesuits. So the Pope dreams of the theology of the people. This approach calls for the appreciation of diverse cultural realities, the interests of the poor and healthy politics. My dear sisters and brothers, important to note, this approach has no place for neo-Marxist ideologies. Some people even accuse Pope Francis of being a neo-Marxist, bringing in Marxist ideologies. So this has no place for neo-Marxist ideologies. Rather, it is Christ-centered. So my question here is, have we developed the much needed theology of our people? And now I come to the ninth one. Laudato Si talks about the dangers of relativism and points out how people treat other human beings in an utilitarian perspective as mere objects, turning people into Homo economicus. We know Homo erectus. From Homo erectus today we are talking about Homo economicus, the economical man. So the market becomes God, and anything can be offered in the altar of market monopolization. Any amount of social teaching won't work unless there is a real awakening, unless there is a real conversion of the heart. They say today there should be a conversion of feet, conversion of the head, and conversion of the ideas. So, do I sell God? And I think this is a very pertinent question. Do I sell God? Do we sell God? Is spirituality has become a selling commodity? So, and that is a very fine book. If you have, there are e-copies available, please do read. The Harvey Cox is a Methodist minister, so the market as God. A beautiful analogy are how people sell God today. And now I come to the 10th one. You must have heard the Pope Francis, the religious antichrist, and the Roman Catholic Church in the last days. There are so many people telling the Pope will die soon, the Catholic Church is going to the dogs, so things like that. So 10 years are over with Pope Francis. One author laments, I am troubled by Pope Francis' increasing tendency to conflate Catholic wisdom with a left-leaning secular humanitarianism. This is just one example. There are plenty, a plethora of criticism against Pope Francis. To understand the Holy Father, one has to spend time and systematically analyze his teaching. Indeed, another challenge for all of us. Now I come to the concluding slide. This is slide 28. So the Holy Father says, tradition is not a museum. This is from, again, Let Us Dream. The Holy Father says, tradition is not a museum. True religion is not a freezer, and doctrine is not static, but grows and develops. It is like a tree that remains the same, yet which gets bigger and bears even more fruit, good fruit. So what is needed perhaps, he says, what we need is proper discernment. My dear sisters and brothers, there we have given another small picture, writing on the wall. In English language, we have this phrase, see the writing on the wall. So it comes from the 5th chapter of Daniel. So we have these 3 words, mene, tekel, peres. So it seems Daniel came and deciphered these 3 words. Your kingdom is going to end. It is going to be given to the Persians. You are going to die. So that is the deciphering or the cryptic words of these 3. So today one has to read the signs of the times. So reading the signs of the times, they say it starts from Pope John the 23rd, Humane Salutis. That is where he used this term first. And then popes have been using, and Gaudium et Spes number 4 talks about signs of the times. In Mark's Gospel, we read about the signs of the times. So are we reading the signs of the times properly? That is again a thing. This is the last slide. My dear brothers, now I have given you 3-4 slides. The first one is the grand vision of Isaiah that we read in chapter 11. So we read, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the youngest goat, and the calf and the lion and the flattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. We know this, a very famous passage from Isaiah. They say it's a grand vision of Isaiah. Today, this morning, we read about the grand vision of Jesus, Luke 4. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. So that is a grand vision of Jesus, grand vision of Isaiah. And the Pope Francis has dreams. So that's why I have titled my essay as The Dreamer Visionary. So what are my dreams? What is my dream? So with that, I would like to finish. So this is once again to give you a recap. So I began with a small little introduction, and 3 contexts were taken, one from the economic side, the marital side, and the environmental side, and then 3 compassionate areas from marital love, from the wounded nature and the wounded poor people, and then I just shared with you some of the anxieties, some challenges, the 9 challenges, and then I ended with the dream. What is my dream for humanity, for the church? Thank you very much.
Jesuit has spoken. Now Salesian is here to moderate the floor discussion. Those of you are planning to ask, kindly keep this word in mind. Kiss, keep it short and sweet. And Sister Margaret was fighting for the women in the church. I am fighting for the women in this hall. I am sure there will be 1 or 2 questions also from the other side. So now the floor is open for discussions. Yes, kindly pass on the mic. Vikesh, Deacon Vikesh, yes.
Thank you for the very lucid presentation, Father. And very often, no, even many criticize Pope Francis on the grounds that he's too willing to compromise on church's teachings. That's one of the major accusation. And they too highlight saying he speaks more of social justice rather than on spiritual matters. Can you please comment on it, Father?
Yeah, very fine question, but how do you want me to respond to this? You have to read, in the sense, this is, perhaps I will say, this depends upon our stand. If I want to see him as a Marxist, I will definitely see him as a Marxist. Economy that kills. There was such a hue and cry in the United States media when Evangelium came, and they say, this man is here out to destroy markets. There is an institute called Acton Institute, and this Acton Institute is from the church or run by Catholics, but pro-market. So they were all, there was a real hue and cry. They said, this man talks like a Marxist. Perhaps some lenience, I will say, towards the Marxist ideology, but as I said, to brand him as a neo-Marxist will be a sin for me. And you have to again define what is a sin. Moral theology we will give 101 explanation to what is sin. Sin is when I refuse to grow, I sin. When I refuse to pray, I sin. Margaret sister will say, when you refuse to hold an office, you are sinning, perhaps. I'm sorry, I don't know, perhaps
Sister Margaret,
I was a little fast.
kindly
Sorry. Yeah.
pass in the mic to.
Sorry, it may be out of the way. However, what is the opinion of Pope Francis with regard to the digital world?
Beautiful, beautiful. Very recently, today in Pundamalli, they are having a seminar on artificial intelligence. And very recently, the Pope has come out, not the Pope in connection with Jesuits in Santa Clara University. They are bringing out a beautiful book, about 141 pages. Only yesterday I downloaded. I have not gone through it. And your question is, what is his take on digital thing? Obviously, he wants us to be not digital natives, but digitally at least literate, I will say. Very much, the Holy Father is very much on it. This is my take. I am yet to read. Perhaps the audience can enlighten us.
Yes, Father Praveen. Kindly use the mic.
Francis took up his office. He talks more about devil, Satan. And the German paper published this, the Teufel ist wieder da. The devil is back again, in the theological area.
Sicher now Deutsch reden.
Does it anyway affects his moral principles? He is personifying the devil in the sense that's what the theologians say more about is it his weakness or its strong point to talk more about the devil regarding when it comes to the weaknesses of human beings?
Father, thank you very much for the question. I am a moral theologian. I do not know the answer. I have to go and check. Devil and Pope Francis, I have not checked. Perhaps I will check and I will come back to you. Anyway, people who are here in the floor, if you have read something about
Some moral theologian.
Yeah, I am sorry because I didn't enter into that area. Father, please.
Okay, so I think people tend to see devil as a concept, as an evil concept. And Pope Francis says, no, he's a person, a being. So I think that's the difference that he wants to insist upon that. So he's a real enemy of the humanity, and we need to be careful but not be afraid of him.
Okay.
Thank you. I will include it in our syllabus also. I will also teach our students Francis' take on devil. Thank you very much for the question.
Father Augustine.
This is regarding liturgy.
It's a liturgist.
Father, you talked about 3 wounds: wounded in marital love, wounded nature, and wounded poor. Since I did my thesis on the Laudato Si and liturgy, my question pertains. The latest apostolic exhortation from Desiderio, Desiderarvi, from Article 17 to 20, Pope clearly writes, liturgy is the antidote of the spiritual worldliness, where he mentions all that you have said. Can you comment more on this?
Liturgy is an antidote for all the ills, you mean?
Spiritual worldliness.
Spiritual life. Father, a very, very common reading of or an answer to your question, I will say prayer is an answer to many problems. So liturgy means, obviously, I will consider liturgy not as a form, but as a substance, the prayer as such. So perhaps one has to, somebody made a comment this morning, theology has to be done on one's knees. So perhaps we have to go back and we have to be prayerful persons. Prayer, Thomas H. Green, one again our man. So one who prays becomes a prayer. So perhaps prayer can rectify the maladies of today. I don't know whether I have answered your question correctly, but since I am not a liturgist, I am a moral theologian, we think of always sin and maybe not devil. So maybe you can enlighten us, Father, please. Since you asked the question, you have something in mind, I believe.
It's, to be nutshell, liturgy always we think as something to do with church, which ends there. Whereas Pope is a little more has a deep insight. Liturgy has to be lived in day-to-day life. It has to be, for example, the Eucharist, the climax, the source and summit of our Christian life is a Eucharist, where we talk about kenotic love, self-emptying love. If you could empty yourself for love in day-to-day life, be it in marriage, be it with the creation, or be it with the poor, this can serve as the antidote for all the evils that is in the society, where you also, the first point you brought in about the concern about the context of the Eucharist, I thought you would develop a little more on that. Anyhow, thank you, Father.
Thank you.
We could just go for last intervention in case anyone else is still inspired.
So we have touched on devil, we have touched on liturgy. Any other area?
We touched upon compassion.
Compassion,
yes.
Okay. Any church historians?
Yeah, Kennedy, maybe the last intervention. Brother Kennedy.
Father, when we talk about all this mercy, compassion, one cap never fits for all, and all these things, when we hear all these things, it seems that we are proposing a kind of a situational ethics, which is based on mercy and compassion. So does he really promote, by reading his encyclical letters, we are clear that he is against the relativism, but does he promote a kind of a situational ethics which is based on the mercy and compassion? Or rather, what is the role of objective norm of morality?
My dear brother, thank you very much. See, Joseph Fletcher and situational ethics, beautiful. But at the same time, that I think I pointed out in the slide, Benedict will talk about the tyranny of relativism. And I will never equate our man, Pope Francis, to a man who proposes relativism. Obviously, see, objective morality stays. That's why now in certain canon stays. We cannot meddle with that. Okay, it stays, and it does not mean that we are watering down also. So that's why, for example, in another context, in Laudato Si, Pope will say, I am not asking you to go back to Stone Age. When he talks about progress, we say progress is almost today pictured as a devil. So I'm not asking you to go back to Stone Age, but at the same time have compassion. So this will be more in lines of probabilism and all, no? In the sense, take case by case. That's why I said one size fits for all. No, don't take that attitude. So go slow, and don't apply morality as such. Do I understand? Do I answer your question well? So it's not at all a relativist position. So relativism is not in the annals of Pope's thinking. No, certainly not. But whereas more of compassion, compassion about see, think of ordinary people. Sometimes I believe we talk like canonists. We think we know the law. Perhaps we know the law. At the same time, the reality outside is very, very different. So we need to have a big heart. So in that sense, the pastoral application comes to hand. That's what I believe. And as such, obviously we don't prescribe to situational ethics at all. Okay, so this is what I will answer.
So Stanley, I would like to tell you, if I don't thank you, I will sin. So well, jokes apart, thank you, dear Father Stanley, for your wonderful presentation on the theme, Pope Francis the Dreamer and Visionary. In your presentation, you provided much clarity in presenting some of his theological insights on moral and social teachings. Let all of us search and journey alongside the Holy Father, the great dreamer and visionary, for what is ethically beneficial, virtuous, and for the common good. Thank you very much, Father. As a sign of our appreciation, I would like to don this ponade.
Thank you, dear Father Stanley, for instilling the moral and social teachings of our Pope with clarity and fidelity to the spirit of the Church. Thanks to Father Patrick for meaningfully moderating the session. Ecclesia semper reformanda est. The Church must always be reformed is a constructive perception of the progressive pastors and theologians. It is also a conflicting criticism of the conservative authorities and hierarchical thinkers. Perhaps the Church has to change in the non-essentials and its functions while remaining strong and always the same in the unchanging essentials of truth and faith. To ease these tensions, may I invite Reverend Father Arul Kumar, professor at the DBTC, with his talk on the title Canonical and Curial Reforms of Pope Francis. May I invite Reverend Father Franklin, visiting professor at DBTC, to moderate the session and the floor discussion.
Yeah, it's already lunch time, but we have to speak of the reforms before going for lunch. Some may be heavy and some may be light. Afterwards, we shall take a heavy lunch. Canonical and curial reforms. So when I was preparing the topics, okay, certainly putting it last, some have already touched a few topics in between. Okay, we shall dwell little bit and then we shall focus on the other things. 10 years of, let's say, Reformation, and certainly that you know that 1/4 of the canon law has been revised. 1/4 of the canon law, almost. Imagine, so much has been done in the past 10 years. And especially the canonical reforms, I am putting 11 titles so that for you to memorize few of them. Zero tolerance, due rights for the lay people, ministries of lector, restriction on traditional Latin Mass, excommunication to a perpetually professed, temporary professor on leaving the institute, dismissal ipso facto, deadline for recourse, the authority to modify, can a non-cleric member become a superior in a clerical institute, and the expedient process of matrimony. And the curial reforms, we will dwell on the one reform that came about, that is Predicate Evangelium. So there are around few points. Let's see where we reach. The rest is there in your handouts. The first one is a very, very serious one. As soon as he took up, okay, Pope Francis, as soon as he took up, the main thing that was handling or daunting the whole Catholic Church was the sexual crimes. And the second one is economic crimes. Okay, so the sexual crimes, especially by the clerical men. Zero tolerance to clergy who sexually abuse children, especially to minors and children and vulnerable. Okay, this all we must know. There are good number of priests, okay, that we should not forget. But there is one part of the section of the clerical people and those who defy the Catholic law and bring defame to the Catholic Church, and how to deal with it. It's not one question or one country. And you see the so many reports of these countries. They are not made by the church authorities, they are all made by the civil authorities. They made a public study and then brought about reports, and many more reports are not yet published. And you see, after going through the reports and so much that comes from those reports, Pope tells abuse in any form is unacceptable. It is a sin that shames us. And once again, Francis says, we join the pain of the victims and we for this sin, the sin of what happened, the sin of failing to help, the sin of covering up and denial, the sin of the abuse of power. So these sexual sins, they come from these perspectives or these horizons. I would like us to renew our complete commitment, that is zero tolerance to sexual abuse in the church. Now, what is the response of the earlier popes and particularly of this pope? Earlier response, the Sacred Congregation for the Holy Office, the later became the Doctrine of Faith, and today the Dicastery of the Doctrine of Faith. They established the manner of proceeding in such cases, which instruction crimen sollicitudinis in 1962. So 1962 itself, before the Vatican, during the Vatican, already it was there, emerging. And the response of the Pope Francis, let us go in detail. Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors was instituted in 2014. As soon as a Pontifical Commission was instituted, deal with these cases. This commission forms part of the Roman Curia with the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith. So they are put into one of the sections or one of the department in one of the dicasteries, forms part of the Doctrine of Faith. Two important apostolic letters also he has written in this regard. One is Come una madre amorevole, like a loving mother, in which he reiterates that abuses should be removed from the ecclesiastical offices for grave reasons. And second one is much more important for all the leading positions or all those who are in authority. In case of negligence, the diocesan bishop or the major superior may legitimately be removed from the office. That's why the zero tolerance is coming down heavily even on the superiors. No covering up anymore. And there is another, Vos estis lux mundi, you are the light of the world, published in 2019, in which he brings about the delicts against the sixth commandment of the Decalogue, consisting of forcing someone by violence or threat or through some abuse of authority to perform or to submit to sexual acts. Performing sexual acts with a minor or a vulnerable person. The production or exhibition, possession of or distribution, including by electronic means, of child pornography, as well as by the recruitment or inductment of a minor or a vulnerable person to participate in pornographic exhibitions. So all these were not contemplated in the canon law. As the age develops, modern age develops, and these have to be reflected. And much more in the process of culpability, and these apostolic letters and the Vademecum that came later, they procedure-wise, they tell us how to go about for the accuser, in favor of the accuser, and also to prove that those who are accused. The attitude towards the victims of sexual abuse, that is also more important. When somebody comes and then tells that I have been abused, what is our attitude? It is of welcoming, listening, and supporting, including through the provision of specific services. We need to offer also the spiritual assistance offer medical assistance, including therapeutic and psychological assistance. So it is not listening and okay, go ahead, we will do something. No. All these assistance should be offered by the institute. And there is also another part that compliance with the state law. And for us it is the POCSO. And what do they tell us? When these cases are reported, what is our response, or what is, let us say, how do we cooperate with the state laws and state authorities? Vatican Summit on the Protection of Minors in the Universal Church level, and it was one of the unique forum or unique meeting. They had the Vatican Summit on the Protection of Minors in 2019, and they invited all the presidents of episcopal conferences, and they invited the victims. Some were present physically, some were talking through the conferences, okay, online. And first thing, as we told, that they listened to their experiences. Before putting down anything, before doing what is the process to be followed, they listened to them. Very painful stories, but they listened to them. And they came up to prepare a practical handbook indicating the steps to be taken by the authorities at key moments when a case emerges. And that's what today we follow. And you see, as a follow-up of the summit, various norms and procedures are developed by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, the DDF today. 2020, they came up with a Vadamekam. Vadamekam is guidelines, okay, procedural guidelines. And we see that particularly in the revised Canon Law Book 6, the whole book of 6 has been revised. And in I just quote one of the things. Penal sanctions in the church was promulgated. The whole penal sanctions was revised. And especially Canon 1398 with regard to specific offences against minors. So they inserted this canon particularly. A cleric is to be punished with the deprivation of office and with other just penalties, not excluding, where the case calls for it, dismissal from the clerical state. That's why I call it zero tolerance. If he commits an offense against the 6th commandment with a minor or with a person who habitually has an imperfect use of reason, that's what vulnerable, or with the one to whom the law recognizes equal protection. Grooms or induces a minor or a person who habitually has an imperfect use of reason, or one whom lawfully recognizes equal protection, to expose himself to herself to pornographically or to take part in pornographic exhibitions, whether real or stimulated. Immorally acquires, retains, exhibits or distributes in whatever manner or whatever technology pornographic images of minors or of persons who habitually have imperfect use of reason. So sharing of pornographic images or videos. So even that, it comes under the canon law. Now we go on with 7th December 2021, norms regarding delicts reserved to the Congregation of Doctrine of Faith. They come up with the procedural norms. And once again 2022, that procedural guidelines have been updated. So it will be going on updating. And last we come out with the Apostolic Constitution, Predicate Evangelium. So we are dealing with a most, let us say, the disputable crime. The second one is due rights for the lay people in the church and in the decision-making process. The presence of non-bishop at the synods. Okay, already it has been initiated after the Second Vatican Council, and we see in the key Vatican departments they are there. The first thing is the presence synod with the voting rights. That marks the difference. So far they have been participating as accessors or facilitators or consultants. Now first time they are going to vote, and that is the biggest difference that we are going to make in this particular synod. Around 400 participants for the coming synod in October, and 140 of them lay people. They were chosen by the ecumenical or the different episcopal conferences. Around 70 of them were appointed from this, and around in the 70, around 50 of them are women, half percentage are women. Okay, so this is how we go about. And the key Vatican departments and the provincial of FMA is already listed out. I have also listed out, and in various departments how they are in the commanding positions and the decision making process. Soon we will see also heading a dicastery, certainly. Ministries of lector and acolyte to be open to women. This also we have enlightened with the motu proprio Spiritus Domini. It was in 2011, modifies the 230 paragraph 1 of the Code of Canon Law, telling that from lay persons, so laymen to lay persons. The earlier formulation was laymen who possess age and qualification established by the decree of confirmed bishops. The new formulation goes lay persons, which means lay persons, it includes also women. Okay. And Pope, writing to the then prefect Ladaria, clarifies a few points, in which I also, in one of the questions I clarified that instituted ministries and ordained ministries. Okay, so only which carries the ordination where it is required, okay, the priests. All others, all those who have received baptism and confirmation could be given that choice. So more and more you will see they will be instituted. And he also tells that the bishops should recognize this by a formal act. Now we come to also on the question of women. We told that it was opened by, okay, the question of deacon, diaconate for women. It was opened by Pope John Paul II and it was closed. Once again, Pope Francis in 2020 has opened. I'm not sure whether he has closed it or not. But for the time being, those who are claiming, okay, can we ordain women or not, for the time being, we have to ask the doctrinal point of view, which means the theology, to discover whether there are enough proofs or developments in this field, and the group will come up. For the time being, 1379 paragraph 3 states, both the person who attempts to confer a sacred order on a woman and the woman who attempts to receive the sacred order, incarelate sententia, excommunication reserved to the apostolic see. A cleric, moreover, may be punished by dismissal from the clerical state. So imagine some of them in the earlier, before coming to women, the gay priests, those who have gay tendencies, they were also being ordained. Or those who have left from one to the other, simply bishops, they accommodated. And those bishops were taken to task and then excommunicated them. So in the same way, we are talking, but the current law has this, and let us respect. If the theology develops and comes up, certainly the canon law will change. The restriction on traditional Latin Mass according to the Missal of Pius V. You see that in the beginning of the year we have reflected upon this in our Theologate. It is a liturgical norm. One thing that we need to keep in mind, Vatican II has brought about lots of reforms. And this one particular group, that Lefebvrians, they wanted to go back to the previous missal, which means what is underlying factor is they want to deny the reforms brought about by the Vatican II. We don't accept Vatican II. That is the underlying factor. And the two popes have given permission to celebrate in the traditional Latin Mass, yes, which means without looking at the people, the previous one. Now, this pope came down heavily because even the newly ordained priests in some of the dioceses, unfortunately, it is not in India, so it is not a problem for us, but elsewhere, even after becoming priests, immediately the new priests, they ask the bishops, can we celebrate using the Missal of Latin Missal? Which means no connection with what we have studied, and they don't want to accept the Vatican II. And this is the underlying factor, okay. So he came down heavily with, kindly don't give any more permissions. He told the bishops, those have been already given permission, let them celebrate. but don't give any more permissions without consulting us. So that's how this practical thing came about. And then Desideravi, once again it came up. Let us open once again what is the meaning of liturgy and what is the meaning of liturgical norms brought out by Vatican II. So they bring in a summary. Okay, that's what we had reflected in the month of June. And exclaustation to perpetually professed member. Exclaustation, the major superiors can grant it for 3 years. Okay, if he's a cleric, he has to find a bishop who accommodates him. Okay, that's how the excardination and summary is incardinated. Okay, even for sisters. Okay, 3 years. Now, from 3 years, they have given the right or authority to the moderators, supreme moderators, to till 5 years they can grant. Okay, exclaustation till 5 years. And the next one is for the temporary professed on leaving the institute. For the temporary professed. The previous one, Canon 688, paragraph 2, during the time of temporary profession, or a person was to leave the institute for grave reason, can obtain departure from the supreme moderator with the consent of his council in the case of an autonomous monastery. Okay, before it was reserved only to the pontifical right. Pontifical right and the diocesan right. Pontifical right, we come under pontifical right. And those who are diocesan right may be the Seva missionaries or the SMA, they come under the diocesan bishop. Okay, diocesan right, because bishop is the supreme moderator for you. Now, before the pontifical right, supreme moderators can give, but now the same right is given to the supreme moderators of the institute without going to the bishop. They can give dismissal for the temporary professed. Okay, so in case if you do not know, you can tell your competent superiors. The next one is dismissal ipso facto of a religious for illegitimate absence for 12 continuous months. You see another factor that we come across. People disappear and they are not coming back anymore without proper authorization. Okay, so in this canon law 665 paragraph 1 states religious are to live in their own religious houses and are not to be absent from it except with the permission of their superior. Okay, so this is for general, and those who are go for study apostolate, the provincial himself or herself writes, okay, so you are to remain in the particular place for your study period of time or the apostolate period of time. That is legitimate. Illegitimately, because of some problems in the community, they disappear. Okay, when the problem is solved, I'll come. Or some family problems, I have to go without getting the proper consent, they just leave, and then after 1 year they appear. So these many institutes have these problems. And the change introduced is Pope Francis has added one more clause to canon 694, which tells about the dismissal. Dismissal ipso facto. If they are absent more than 12 continuous months and they have not returned, we do not know their whereabouts, it is possible that to include this ipso facto dismissal. And the next one is deadline for recourse. Those who are dismissed, the deadline for recourse is given only 10 days were given. You have to appeal, and now the 10 days appeal has been extended to 13 days for those who are receiving this dismissal. No, 13 days you can respond or you can make an appeal. The authority to modify obligations connected to pious causes and foundations, this applies to all the religious institutes, and we are receiving so much of, let's say, charity based, or those who are having contract, they are dedicating houses or pious foundations or these foundation masses, all those things, or properties we are receiving in charity with a contract. And in the contract, if suppose if they die, can you modify? And people have entered into serious problems. If a property or donation received by way of contract, we need to respect the intention of the donors. And in case if we want to modify, we have to consult with the those who are living descendants, and also the Council for Economy Okay, if it is the bishop, or if it is a religious institute, the economic council, then afterwards we can modify. Okay, we can destine for some other purposes. So the intention is to respect the intention of the donor. Can a non-Catholic member become a superior in a clerical institute? And Canon 588, it remains, the spirit of the canon is changed, but the canon remains, which means in a religious institute where clerical and non-clerical members are there, a non-clerical lay brother can become a superior. Okay, so this has been the authority has been given to the institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life. There are 3 conditions. If they want to nominate a superior of a local house, the supreme moderator can do. Okay, with the consent of the council, can do. If suppose if a lay brother has been appointed as for the appointment of provincial, what should be done? You can do, but you have to wait for the written license from the Holy See, that this particular dicastery for consecrated life. And in case if the general chapter appoints one to be the supreme moderator, it can be done. Once again, it has to wait for the approval of the this dicastery. Has been done or not? Yes. As soon as this law was issued, it was approved in May. In July, the Holy Cross congregation, they had their chapter, and it was the assistant general was proposed, and after 3 days it was accepted. So during the general chapter itself, he was declared, he was the supreme moderator. So immediately the effect took place. Earlier they had asked, earlier also they had proposed, and it was not accepted. The 11th one is experience matrimonial nullity process. Okay, this is regarding the how to get a nullity of the matrimony celebrated legally, formally in the church. How to get it faster? You know that ecclesiastical tribunals are there in each diocese, and there are canon lawyers working to nullify if there are grounds. So there are 9 to 10 grounds for which we can give the nullity. And if you are sure that this matrimony has gone through a process where they have not followed up the system, or it has been a fraud or external force, if you are sure, and for these sure cases, let us not wait. They can directly appeal to the bishop himself. Bishop himself can take up, or through others. One is the single executive sentence in favor of nullity is effective. Before it was, there were necessary the 2 sentences. You apply for nullity because of some grounds, and the nullity is obtained. And second sentence, it has to be got from another tribunal. Okay, so we need to have 2 positive sentences for nullifying the marriage. Now after this reform, they said 1 sentence is enough for the nullity of marriage. The third, briefer process to be applied in those cases where allegedly nullity marriage is supported by particularly clear arguments. 30 days for instruction and the testimony, and another 15 days for those who are giving the judgments. So it can be done in a faster way. How practical? It is really has to go by case. It is not so easy as it is explained here. Now we come to the second part. Okay, I just highlight a few things. Pope Francis, the curial reforms, Predicate Evangelium, preach the gospel. Okay, I am also giving the previous ones. Earlier curial reforms, Pope Sixtus V and Pius X and Paul VI, Apostolic Constitution, Regime Ecclesiae Universae, and John Paul II, Pastor Bonus. And the present Pope has, after 9 years of hard work with the Council of Cardinals, around 8 of them were there, and we have come about in 19th March 2022, this particular Predicate Evangelium, preach the gospel. The structural changes in Predicate Evangelium, how a Roman Curia looks like, how it has been organized. Okay, there is a Secretary of State. Okay, the first one is Secretary of State, like internal ministry, and there were 9 congregations, may not be, it is wrong, 10, 9 congregations, and we have 3 tribunals, okay, the Supreme Court like, and we have pontifical councils, okay, there are 12 of them, pontifical councils, and later, and also administrative services, okay, dealing with the finance. And this has been the previous one. Now we have Secretary of State, it remains alone, and all the other organisms except the economic services, they have been clubbed into around 16 dicasteries. You see that the dicasteries: evangelization, doctrine of faith, service of charity, Eastern churches, causes of science, all these separate dicasteries. And we have the tribunals and the institutions of finance. That's why where we call it the second biggest crime after sexual crime. It is economic crimes in the church. The change, some of the salient features I highlight. The change in primacy among the dicasteries. First, in the previous one, Pastor Bonus, we had seen the dicastery for doctrine of faith, number 1, because it is the discipline oriented. Now this Pope changes that. No, it is a evangelization of peoples. That is a primordial department or dicastery, it has to be. And he becomes the patron, okay, the first one. He becomes responsible, and other collaborators are pro-prefect. So he's heading the department. He gives the change, or nature of the church is evangelization. So let us focus on that. The rest, let us follow secondary. So the primary focus he has given to this particular dicastery. And we are happy that the Asian cardinal is leading. And there is, second, you see that juridical equality. So we are listing out that the 16 dicasteries, they are juridically, each one is equal. And the third one is the vicarious nature of the Roman Curia. Any baptized Catholic can lead a dicastery. It was not possible before. Any baptized Catholic. So soon we will also see any baptized Catholic, which means non-ordained members would lead the dicastery. So at least the rule is set in such a way that later they can become. And we see that so many things. 204 paragraph 1, all Christian faithful are those in as much as they have been incorporated in Christ through baptism, have been constituted as the people of God. So it is the baptism that gives the public ministerial priesthood, the common priesthood. And we see another one, episcopal co-responsibility with the spirit of communion, recognizing the consultative function of all the bishops of Latin and Eastern churches, who have now a more distinct and incisive role. Before they were thinking that the Roman Curia is only at the service of the Pope. No, it's not only at the service of the Pope, and also for all the bishops. And we see the economic reforms, separate Secretariat for the Economy and the Council. Now Vatican also has introduced the budgeting system. Each dicastery has to present the budget as we present the budget. Before, each dicastery was autonomous. Okay, the cardinal was head, even managing the funds. Now no more. And you see that economic crimes, 2 of the top officials were punished, Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Becciu and Angelo Calaio. They were criminalized. Okay, they have been stripped off from their positions. And we see the focus on migrants, personal integrity and professionalism in recruiting professionals, interdicasterial and intradicasterial meetings to be much more, not only Italianized, much more internationalized. So these are some of the reforms we can go on talking. Thank you for your patient listening.
So I sincerely thank and appreciate Father Arul Kumar for his erudite presentation on this topic, on the curial reforms and canonical reforms. Pope Francis would say that canonical reforms is not about legalism, it is about facilitating a more pastoral and merciful church. Being mindful of the time constraint that we have, let us put forward our questions in a clear and concise manner. The floor is now open. Brother Stanley.
Thank you, Father Arul. There is a controversy regarding Bishop Joseph Strickland of Texas, US. And it is said that there is a special investigation against this bishop for some tweet on social media regarding the synod. So they say that he may be asked to resign. We don't know, but it's going on, the investigation. There is also criticism that while on the one side the Pope is strict regarding these issues, but there is no investigation against some bishops who are openly promoting homosexual marriages in Germany, for example. So is there a criteria for a Pope to dismiss a bishop canonically? And what are the issues that is very serious, grave reasons to dismiss bishops?
In matters of faith, okay, in matters of faith, okay, even a bishop could come under this excommunication. Openly defile the Catholic faith, or mostly what you ask, in communion with the Catholic Church, the official teaching, and when I am going against, whether it is a bishop or a priest or anyone, okay. So in this case, all these bishops are cardinals, whoever under this, and those who promote homosexual, the Vatican, when it renewed its ratio, we have renewed all the formation houses, we have renewed the ratio basing on that ratio, in which it clearly states that homosexual tendencies, let them not go ahead with the priesthood. So that is the stand that we have. If bishops are speaking, certainly they will be taken to task, even at the removal. If they don't withdraw their positions, it is against the communion with the Catholic Church, and they will be questioned or asked to resign.
Also, the Bishop of Luxembourg actually openly stated that we have to change the Catholic teaching regarding homosexuality. So, and there is nothing done against this bishop so far. So, what is your take on this?
No, we are open to discussion. That's why women priesthood, it was closed, it was been opened again. Okay, nothing wrong in discussing. That the modern sciences will come about how to understand better. So when we have more clarity, only we can go for changing. We are open to change, and I believe that Pope Francis also, wherever it is possible to change, is open to change. But then it has to be accompanied with a sound doctrine or science. Okay, so without that we will make a confusion everywhere. As Father was also asking for me, John, what to tell, whether it is right or wrong, where to draw a line, or each one will interpret somehow. So according to the whims and fancies, Pope said, no, it has to come out somewhere. That bishop, this bishop, everybody will be talking, but nothing concrete will take place. But I am sure, I am also personally, I am open to change if there is a clear doctrine supported by the progressive science. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, Sabinson.
In China and some part of the world, the Pope is not able to intervene in their bishop election and other things and all. In that way, Pope himself, the sole authority of the Church himself, not able to function in those areas. Does anything regarding that you can?
Yeah. In the election of bishops, or the appointment, before we came to the appointment of bishops, you have to see the whole history. The kings, they had a very, very strong nomination of bishops. Okay, otherwise we could not function as a church. And over the centuries, the Holy See gave permission to some of the kings. Okay, you have this. But as soon as it was possible, the change of kings, they were able to withdraw. But it was so, we have to conscientize those kings. And especially in communist countries and or China, in this, we have not arrived at that stage of that cordial relationship, or let's say the official relationship, diplomatic relationship with them. So we are finding some way. The principle is Pope freely appoints the bishops. there in China we have two types, the national churches and the Catholic Church that we are ordaining the bishops. So he is trying to bring both into one. So it is a middle way we are trying to force, because we cannot function. There is no mutual, the diplomatic relationship fully arrived yet. That is the reason. But the principle is the Pope freely appoints. We have to reach everywhere. Where the circumstances are not possible, we are trying to persuade through other channels. Okay, it is a long way to go. I do agree. And
Thank you, Father. As the last question to Father Pinto.
Whims and fancies is what you said just in a few moments ago. Now, is there anything that the canon law does about superiors who use their offices to abuse or to gain advantage and so on and so forth? Is there anything that says that they can be dismissed or not?
one thing, against the minors, it is very clear. Okay, those who cover up or those who send them from one place to the other as they did before, anymore, no, they cannot do. Otherwise, their office will be taken and even they can be removed or excommunicated. To that extent, it has come. Second one, what you say, abuse of power, it has to be proved. Okay, it has to be proved. Otherwise, openly we can talk, this person has abused his power or her power for these favors, but it has to be officially with the documented proof we need to. Otherwise, we cannot take action. If a provincial does, we have to prove to the General Council, and the General Council will ask them to resign, and it has happened in many provinces. The whole council had to resign, they are resigned. Or the provincial, or the vice provincial, or the economer, particularly, they have asked them to resign. So there are, it's not in the air, it has happened. I don't want to mention, okay.
Okay, we close now. On behalf of the community of Becky Don Bosco and all those who are gathered here, let us once again clap our hands and show our appreciation. And I also would like to, on behalf of everyone on the Ponnadik,
Thank you, dear Father Arul, for presenting the novel and innovative moves of our Holy Father in making the Church more appealing and acceptable for the people of this time. Thanks also to Father Franklin for amiably moderating the session. No duty is more important than that of returning thanks, says St. Ambrose. Thus, I now invite Reverend Father Lourdesamy, Professor at DBTC, to propose the words and warmth of gratitude.
In him we live, move, and have our being. So, at the close of this day, let us thank the triune God for the gift of each one of us who together form the ecclesial body of Christ, the Church. Heavenly Father, we are immensely grateful for the person of Pope Francis as the leader of the Church, whose teachings we listened and reflected today. In the next place, we express our deepest sentiments of thanks to Reverend Father Don Bosco Lourdesamy, the provincial and moderator of DBTC, for having presided over this morning's Eucharistic celebration and for invoking God's blessings for this day of study and reflection. Our sincere gratitude to Reverend Father John Alexander, the Vice Provincial and Delegate for Formation, for his utmost support in conducting this day's theology whole day on a right course. Thank you, Father, for your availability and care towards the formation of religious and priests. A very big thanks to our four great
guest speakers, Father Bosco Ryan, Sister DJ Margaret, Father Stanley Sagairaj, and Father Arul Kumar, who in spite their many commitments made themselves available with their expertise to make this day not just informative but formative and transformative for each one of us. May God continue to bless your ministry of apostolic teaching and leadership. Our sincere thanks to Father Raj Kumar, the rector, Father Franklin, the province secretary, and Brother Mariadas, the administrator of Provincial House Community, for generously hosting this event in this premises and extending a wonderful hospitality. We acknowledge gratefully the contribution of the support staff of the Citadel for their kind help to see to the smooth sail of this symposium. I would like to thank all the staff and students of DBTC Kavarapete community for their committed involvement towards the success of this day. In particular, Father Patiraj, the rector and secretary of DBTC, Father Emmanuel, the principal, Father Stanley, the registrar, and Father Robert, the administrator, who have ensured every effort at making this day a memorable and fruitful one. Hence, a cordial thanks to them. Thanks to the staff who acted as moderators and the other to the minute details of each program, and the students who actively prepared and took part. A special mention should be made of the third-year students of theology who have gone out of their way as a group to prepare meticulously every detail of this symposium and executed it so well. It was truly a joyful team effort that made this day a resounding success. Finally, I thank all the participants, both online and those present here, who have come from far and near, heeding to our invitation. You have shown yourselves as committed members of the church, interested in forming yourselves to build the kingdom of God. Thanks from the bottom of our hearts for your presence and active participation. Filled in by the spirit of Pope Francis's vision, let us walk the talk and bear credible witness to the gospel in our daily life. Thanks to one and all, as Pope Francis every Angelus on every Sunday concludes, Buon pranzo.
As we have come to the end of the Theological Symposium, there are two people we need to remember and thank. One is Father Lourdusamy, who took the lead in organizing the Theological Symposium. He saw to every detail, right from contacting the professors, getting the papers ready, reminding them, and then also seeing to the arrangements over here at the Citadel. You know that we are not here, we are not staying here, we are at Kavarapete, but to arrange for the whole symposium here takes a lot of effort. We would like to thank him. May I invite the registrar to don a ponadai and thank Father. Kindly come forward. We would like to thank the Citadel community. Father Lourdusamy already mentioned in the word of thanks, and we have at least one member representing here, Father Franklin as Province Secretary and Administrator of Citadel. Okay, he has gone out of his way to help us in every way possible. So may I invite Father Rector to don a ponadai and thank Father Franklin.
Thank you, dear Fathers Lourdusamy and Emmanuel, for the expressions of gratitude and appreciations. As the curtains for the day is being closed, may all the reflections and learnings, insights and inspirations continue to knock and open the doors of our hearts and minds. Let us conclude this Theological Symposium 2023 with the papal anthem.
குடை நிழலில் உலகால் வேந்தன் வாழியவே ஒரு வெண்கொற்ற குடை நிழலில் உலகால் வேந்தன் வாழியவே பொருதும் படையும் போருமின்றி பொருதும் படையும் போருமின்றி இறைவன் நிறைவாலே மக்கள் மனமாள் வேந்தன் வாழியவே பரமனின் பிரதிநிதியாமே எங்கள் பாப்பரசரை புகழிடுவாமே ஒழுக்கமும் உண்மையும் உரைப்பாரே அதில் வழுவா வரம் அவர் துணையாமே நிறம் அவர் கொடியாமே ஒளி மின்னலின் தூய வரசாமே மும்மகுடம் அவர் முடியாமே வளர் மூல பதியாமே வெண்கொற்ற குடை நிழலில் உலகால் வேந்தன் வாழியவே
Dear fathers, sisters and brothers, just an announcement with regard to the meals. The meals are arranged just close to the hall, so all of us will have the meals here. And those who would like to use the refectory, they can also use the refectory. Then the second one, as we know, at 3:30 we have